Imagine Naruto waking up one day and realizing he's not just the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, he's also carrying a spider god elder who looks at the shinobi world like it's a badly managed ant farm. The Uchiha massacre? Interrupted. Kurama? Demoted from demon fox to premium chakra battery. And the 5 great nations? Suddenly realizing the loud orange kid they ignored is now walking around like the final boss with government paperwork. So grab your ramen, hide your tailed beasts, and let's begin. What if Naruto was the reincarnation of Saint Saturn?
Chapter 1. The weight of a sleeping god. The village did not wake because someone screamed. It woke because the world became too quiet. Konoha had learned to fear noise. It was a shinobi village. Noise meant warning bells. Noise meant explosions in the training fields when a genin forgot basic safety rules. Noise meant the distant crack of emergency flares over the forest, or the barking of Ninken, or the sharp command of a jonin captain cutting through midnight air. Noise meant something had happened. But on the night of the Uchiha massacre, what first disturbed the hidden leaf was not sound, it was silence. It arrived slowly, spreading from the eastern side of the village like frost across glass. Dogs stopped barking. Insects went still. Even the wind that usually moved through the rooftops seemed to hesitate, as if the village itself had taken a breath and forgotten how to release it. On the southern wall, a masked Anbu paused mid-step. He had been on patrol for 6 hours. He was tired, cold, and bored in the way only an elite shinobi could be bored alert enough to notice every detail, disciplined enough not to complain about any of them. His route took him past the old storage district, then above the civilian quarter, then toward the road leading to the Uchiha compound. He stopped before he reached it, not because he saw anything, because every instinct in his body told him that continuing forward would be a mistake. The Anbu crouched on a rooftop and pressed 2 fingers against the tiles. His chakra sense stretched outward, careful and professional. He expected to find killing intent, perhaps intruders. Perhaps a disturbance in the Uchiha district, which had been tense for months in ways no one outside the upper command was allowed to officially discuss. But there was no killing intent. That was what made it worse. Killing intent was human. Killing intent had shape. It had direction. A shinobi could identify it, assess it, resist it. The Anbu had felt killing intent from enemy jonin, from rogue ninja, from wounded beasts cornered in the forest. He had felt it during the Nine-Tails attack, when a monster the size of a mountain had stepped over the village walls and turned homes into splinters with a flick of its tails. This was not that, this was weight, not pressure on his shoulders, not chakra crushing his body, something deeper. A pressure placed directly on the idea of standing upright. His breathing slowed without his permission. For one absurd second, the Anbu wanted to kneel. He did not. He was Anbu. He had served under the 3rd Hokage. He had buried friends. He had killed enemies. He had watched the Nine-Tails burn red against the night sky and still raised his blade afterward. But his hand, against his will, trembled over the roof tile. "Report," whispered the fox-masked operative beside him. The first Anbu did not answer immediately. He stared toward the Uchiha district. Then, very quietly, he said, "Something is awake." Naruto Uzumaki woke to silence, not the silence of his apartment. That was familiar. His apartment was always quiet at night, no parents speaking softly in the other room, no mother telling him to brush his teeth, no father checking the locks, no siblings snoring from across the hall, no warm bodies. No presents, just pipes ticking inside old walls, a refrigerator that hummed when it remembered to work, and the occasional creak of cheap wood whenever the building settled. Naruto was used to that silence. This was different. This silence came from outside. He opened his eyes. For a few seconds, he did not move. He lay on his thin mattress, one hand curled near his chest, blonde hair messy over his forehead, blanket half kicked away from his legs. The room was dark except for moonlight leaking through the window. On the floor were scattered instant ramen cups, a dull kunai he had once found near a training ground, and a notebook filled with messy drawings he never showed anyone. The notebook was open. On the page, a small orange figure stood on top of the Hokage monument, arms raised, smiling wider than any real child smiled, Under it, written in uneven letters, were the words, "Everyone will see me." Naruto did not look at the notebook. He stared at the ceiling. Something inside him had changed. Not suddenly, not violently, not like a door being kicked open, more like a lock turning after 8 long years of waiting. Deep within him, beneath the seal placed by the fourth Hokage, beneath the burning presence of the 9 tails, beneath the small, stubborn flame that was Naruto Uzumaki himself, something ancient opened its eyes. The first thing it noticed was blood, not the blood itself, not the scent, not the act, the pattern. Dozens of chakra signatures were being extinguished across the village's eastern district, one after another, not chaotically, not with the wild rhythm of battle, methodically. A clan was being removed. Naruto's child mind did not understand that, not fully. He knew the Uchiha. He knew Sasuke, the quiet boy girls whispered about in class. He knew the fan symbol on the backs of their clothes. He knew adults lowered their voices when speaking about them, but the thing awakening inside him understood much more. It understood purge. It understood bloodline management. It understood political sanitation disguised as tragedy. It understood that a hidden hand had decided a population was more useful as a lesson than as citizens, and it found the mechanism crude but not unintelligent. Naruto sat up. The movement was too smooth for a child. His blanket slid from his shoulders. His bare feet touched the floor. The boards beneath him creaked once, then went still. Inside his mind, something shifted. Naruto Uzumaki was still there, small, confused, half awake. He sensed an intruder and tried, with the automatic desperation of a lonely child, to make sense of it. "Who are you?" The question barely formed. It was not answered with words. It was answered with scale. A memory that was not Naruto's unfolded behind his eyes. A black sea under a red sky. A throne room vast enough to make mountains feel temporary. Human beings kneeling in rows so long their faces blurred into architecture. A table of elders speaking in calm voices while nations died outside the walls. A spider shadow falling across marble. Centuries passed in a blink. Bodies aged. Vessels failed. Names changed. Worship became government. Government became tradition. Tradition became unquestioned law. And at the center of it all, seated beyond guilt, beyond hunger, beyond ordinary ambition, was a presence so old it had forgotten the difference between ruling and existing. Naruto's breath caught. The small flame of the boy flickered. Not because it was attacked, because the room around it had become too large. A candle did not fight the sunrise. It simply became irrelevant. The thing inside him settled into the vessel with a patience that felt almost gentle. Muscles adjusted, posture corrected, breathing slowed. The chaotic rhythm of a child's body became something measured, controlled, absolute. Naruto stood. In the darkness of his apartment, his eyes changed. They did not turn red like Kurama's. They did not become the pale white of the Hyuga. They became a blue so deep it seemed black unless the moon touched them directly. Ocean dark, ancient, cold enough to make light feel unwelcome. The temperature in the room dropped. A cup of water on the windowsill developed a thin skin of frost around its rim. Naruto looked down at his hands. Small hands, a child's hands, scarred lightly from training, dirty under the nails, human. The being inside him flexed them once. Insufficient, it said. The voice was Naruto's. The tone was not in the mindscape. Something growled. The 9 tails had been asleep, not truly asleep. Kurama never slept the way humans did. He simmered. He waited. He hated. His cage was built from sealing formulas and sacrifice, and every second inside it reminded him of the humans who had trapped him. For 8 years he had watched the boy, watched him cry, watched him shout. Watched him throw himself against loneliness like a bird against glass. Kurama had hated him at first on principle. Hated the whiskered face. Hated the seal. Hated the small body that housed him. But hatred, when trapped in a cage with only one person to look at, could become complicated. The boy was foolish, loud, desperate, annoying, but he was also 8, and now something else had entered the room. Kurama rose behind the bars of the seal, massive eyes narrowing. The sewer of Naruto's mindscape trembled. Water rippled across the floor. Pipes groaned overhead. "What?" Kurama said, voice low enough to shake the inner world. "Are you?" The presence turned toward him, not with surprise, with recognition. Kurama felt it then, not chakra. not like any chakra he had known. This was authority wearing chakra as clothing. It looked at him through Naruto's eyes from somewhere far above the seal, and for the first time in a very long time, the Nine Tails remembered that there were things older than hatred. "You are designated Kurama," the presence said. Kurama's lips pulled back from his teeth. "Do not speak my name like you own it." A pause, then the presence said, "Everything within this vessel is subject to inventory." The cage shook as Kurama slammed one claw against the bars. "You think you can use me, parasite?" The ocean dark gaze did not blink. "I think you have already been used poorly." Kurama froze, not because he was afraid, because the answer was unexpected. The presence continued, "Your energy output is extraordinary. Your emotional volatility is inefficient. Your confinement architecture is primitive but stable. You will serve as an internal power source until further classification." The Nine Tails stared, then he laughed. It was not amusement. It was the sound of a storm discovering a mountain in its path. "You're wearing the boy's body and talking about me like a battery." Yes, no hesitation. No insult, just confirmation. Kurama's laughter died. In that moment, hatred became something sharper. "You have no idea what that boy is," he said. The presence looked away from the cage. "I know exactly what he is." Outside the mindscape, Naruto walked to the sink and turned the tap. Brownish water coughed once, then cleared. He washed his hands. There was no blood on them, not yet. Still, he washed. Then he looked toward the window. The Uchiha district burned in his senses, not with fire, with information, sharing in signatures flaring under trauma. Chakra networks collapsing. Fear making patterns in the dark. An execution moving according to political design. It was almost elegant, almost. Naruto stepped away from the sink. He did not dress properly. He wore the same loose shirt and shorts he had slept in. He did not put on sandals at first, then paused, examined the floor, and selected them because the village surfaces contained contaminants. It was not modesty, it was practicality. He walked to the door. On the desk, the notebook remained open. The drawing of the orange boy smiled at the Hokage monument. Naruto did not look back. He opened the apartment door and stepped into the hallway. The building's old corridor was empty. Usually there would have been some sound from the other tenants. A cough, a radio, someone arguing over late rent, someone muttering about the demon brat living down the hall. Tonight, every door remained shut. Behind one of them, an old woman sat upright in bed, both hands pressed over her mouth, though she did not know why. Behind another, a tired shop clerk who had once refused to sell Naruto fresh vegetables stared at the wall with tears sliding silently down his face. None of them heard footsteps. Naruto moved without hurry down the stairs, past the mailboxes, through the front entrance, into the cold midnight street. The moon above Konoha was pale. It would not remain that way. Naruto paused beneath it, head tilting slightly. The village stretched around him in layers, civilian homes. Shinobi compounds, administrative buildings, training grounds, the Hokage monument watching over everything like carved memory. Beneath it all, 1,000 chakra signatures moved, slept, dreamed, feared, human organization, messy, emotional, temporary, yet functional. The being inside Naruto assessed it in silence. The hidden leaf was not an empire, not exactly. It was a military settlement wrapped in the language of family. Interesting. The boy's memories supplied context: Hokage, will of fire, academy, ramen, loneliness, hatred from strangers. Laughter used as armor. The presence sorted through those memories with clinical precision. Most were irrelevant, some were useful. A few were persistent, especially the hunger, not physical hunger. That was easy to solve, the other kind. The child had wanted acknowledgement with an intensity that bordered on religious devotion. He wanted the village to see him, to say his name without disgust, to look at him and find value. The presence considered this, then filed it under governance vulnerability. A population that denied recognition to a necessary vessel weakened its own asset, poor management. Naruto began walking east. He passed under street lamps that flickered as he approached. The shadows around him did not deepen exactly. They seemed to become more organized. The air near his shoulders shimmered faintly, as if invisible limbs were unfolding behind him but had not yet chosen to become real. A cat crossed the road ahead. It saw him and stopped. For 3 seconds, animal and God regarded each other. Then the cat lowered itself flat to the ground. Naruto continued. On rooftops above, shinobi noticed him. One Chunin guard saw the small blonde figure moving alone and opened his mouth to call out. The words never came. His throat tightened. Not from fear he understood, but from a certainty his body accepted before his mind did. Do not interfere. The guard watched Naruto pass beneath him. Only when the boy was 3 streets away did the Chunin realize he had been holding his breath. He inhaled sharply and nearly fell from the roof. In the Hokage Tower, Hiruzen Sarutobi stood before a window with his pipe forgotten in his hand. He had not been sleeping. Old men slept lightly in peaceful times. In times like these, they did not sleep at all. The reports had begun coming in before midnight. Strange movement near the Uchiha district. Patrol disruptions, communication delays. Anbu units sensing something they could not define, and beneath all of it, the operation, the decision, the sin. Hiruzen had spent decades believing leadership meant choosing the least destructive option from a table of unforgivable ones. He had survived wars by compromise, protected the village by accepting shadows. Allowed men like Danzo to exist because he had convinced himself every light needed darkness behind it. Tonight, that belief sat in his stomach like stone. The Uchiha were being erased. Itachi was carrying the blade. Danzo had shaped the necessity. The elders had agreed. And Hiruzen, 3rd Hokage of the Hidden Leaf, had failed to stop it. He closed his eyes, then he felt it. The pipe slipped from his fingers and struck the floor. Hiruzen's chakra rose instinctively. Old power, still formidable, moved through his body. For a moment, he was not an old man in robes, but the professor, the god of shinobi to some, student of the 1st and 2nd Hokage, master of every elemental nature Konoha had ever produced. And still, the sensation crawling across the village made him feel young, too young. Like a boy standing before Hashirama Senju for the first time and realizing that power could be kind and terrifying in the same breath. Except this was not Hashirama. Hashirama's chakra had been life. Vast, overwhelming, impossible to ignore but alive. This was colder. This was not killing intent. This was ownership, and Anbu appeared kneeling behind him. Hokage-sama. I feel it, Hiruzen said. The Anbu masked face remained lowered, but his voice betrayed strain. It is moving toward the Uchiha district. Hiruzen turned slowly. What is? The Anbu hesitated. That hesitation chilled Hiruzen more than the report itself. We don't know. Naruto reached the river road. The Uchiha district lay beyond it, separated from the village's central flow by both geography and politics. Even as a child, Naruto had understood the district was different. Cleaner streets, quieter homes. People who looked at outsiders as if they were measuring them and finding them unnecessary. Tonight, the district's boundary felt less like a neighborhood entrance and more like the edge of an experiment. He stopped at the bridge. Beneath it, water moved black and slow. For the first time since waking, something inside him stirred, not Kurama, Naruto, a small pressure. A feeling without words, fear not for himself, for someone else. The presence examined it. Sasuke Uchiha, the boy from class, dark hair, cold eyes, always praised, always surrounded. Always alone in a different shape. Naruto's memories of Sasuke were messy. Envy, irritation, challenge, recognition. The strange fury of seeing someone who had everything Naruto wanted and still seemed unhappy with it. The child inside the vessel pushed faintly against the dark. Sasuke. The presence considered the name, then continued walking. Not because Naruto wanted it, not because Naruto feared for him, but because Sasuke Uchiha was likely relevant. The bridge creaked under Naruto's sandals. Halfway across, the moonlight changed. Above Konoha, the pale moon dimmed. A red tint spread over its surface, slow as ink dropped into water. No one screamed. No alarm sounded, but across the village, sleepless shinobi looked up one by one. The moon became red. Naruto did not look surprised. He stepped off the bridge and entered the road leading to the Uchiha compound. Itachi Uchiha moved through his home like a ghost carrying history's sharpest knife. His face was calm. That was what would haunt anyone who saw him. Not rage, not madness, not pleasure. Calm. He had already killed people who had held him as a baby. People who had praised his genius. People who had suspected him. People who had trusted him. Each step took him deeper into a future he had chosen because every alternative led to civil war, foreign invasion, and the possible destruction of the brother he loved more than the village he was saving. Itachi did not allow himself to shake. He could shake later, if later existed. A man stepped from a doorway ahead, sharing an active, kunai raised. Itachi. The name came not as an accusation, but as a plea. Itachi's eyes hardened. The Mangekyo turned. The man collapsed without a sound. Itachi stepped past him, then he stopped. The air changed, not in front of him. Everywhere, his Sharingan caught details instantly. Dust particles slowed in his perception. The temperature dropped. His breath became faintly visible. Somewhere nearby, a hanging lantern flickered and went out, though no wind touched it. Itachi turned his head. At the far end of the street stood a child, small, blonde, bare-legged, wearing a sleep shirt and sandals. Naruto Uzumaki. Itachi knew of him, of course. Everyone did, the Jinchuriki. The village's wound given human shape, the fourth Hokage's legacy, though almost no one was allowed to say so. But the child standing in the street was not the loud academy failure Itachi had occasionally seen from rooftops. This child stood perfectly still, too still. His eyes were dark blue, nearly black. The Sharingan focused on him and failed. Itachi's vision did not blur. It did not reject the image. It simply provided no meaningful interpretation. Chakra system, unreadable. Emotional state, absent. Threat level, impossible. For one brief moment, Itachi Uchiha prodigy, Anbu captain, clan killer, Mangekyo wielder felt the most primitive instinct available to the human body, run. He did not run, because Sasuke was still alive somewhere behind him, because his mission was not complete. Because Itachi had already sacrificed too much to allow fear to decide the final shape of the night, he turned fully toward Naruto. The child watched him with mild interest, no anger, no horror, no confusion, just interest. Itachi spoke first. Naruto Uzumaki. The child tilted his head. The movement was small, bird-like, analytical. That is the vessel designation, he said. Itachi's fingers tightened around his blade. The voice was wrong, not transformed, not monstrous. It sounded like Naruto. That made it worse. You should not be here, Itachi said. The child's gaze moved past him, toward the houses, toward the bodies, toward the living signatures hiding, fleeing, failing. I disagree. Itachi felt pressure settle over his shoulders. His knees did not buckle, only because he forced them not to. The pressure was not chakra in the normal sense. It did not attack his system. It did not try to crush his bones or disrupt his flow. It simply informed every cell in his body that resistance was an outdated assumption. His Sharingan spun. Tsukuyomi gathered. Itachi did not want to use it on Naruto. Whatever this was, whatever had happened, Naruto was still a child of the village. But the thing standing before him was not moving like a child, not speaking like a child, not feeling like anything human. The Mangekyo locked. For an instant, the world turned black and red. A realm of Itachi's making unfolded, a place where time obeyed him, where perception became weapon, where minds broke under the weight of a single second stretched into eternity. The technique touched Naruto and shattered, not dramatically, not with an explosion. It simply failed to find purchase. Like a blade swung at the reflection of the moon on water, Itachi's right eye burned. A thin line of blood slid down his cheek. The child looked at him. Primitive mental architecture, he said. Impressive for local biology. Itachi's breath caught. Local biology. The phrase struck him harder than an insult. This being was not speaking like a shinobi assessing another shinobi. It was speaking like a scholar examining insects under glass. Behind Naruto, the air shimmered. Something unfolded. At first, Itachi thought they were shadows. Then limbs emerged. Long, dark, jointed appendages extending from behind the child's body without tearing cloth or flesh. They did not grow from him exactly. They appeared from the space around him, as if reality had made room for anatomy that had always been waiting there. Spider limbs. Elegant, wrong. Each tipped with a delicate, finger-like point. They moved with surgical precision, not threatening, that made them more terrifying. Itachi raised his blade. Naruto looked toward the center of the district. You are conducting a purge, he said. Itachi said nothing. Political objective. Bloodline containment, prevention of civil conflict, elimination of unstable faction, preservation of selected heir for emotional and genetic continuity. Itachi went cold. The child's eyes returned to him, efficient within your limitations. For the first time that night, Itachi's mask cracked. Not visibly to most, but enough. Enough that Naruto Saturn noticed. You object to my assessment. Itachi's voice was quiet. I object to you speaking of them as if they are materials. The child considered that, then said, they are. The words hung between them. In the distance, someone sobbed once and fell silent. Itachi's blade lowered by a fraction. He understood then that this was not an enemy he could defeat, perhaps not even one he could meaningfully delay, but he could still complete his purpose. Sasuke, he had to reach Sasuke. He had to make Sasuke hate him, had to make him live, had to make him strong enough to survive what came after. Whatever this thing was, Sasuke could not be left in its path without preparation. Itachi vanished in a body flicker, not away, deeper into the district. Naruto watched him go. The spider limbs flexed once. A lesser predator might have chased. A threatened ruler might have punished the insult. Saturn did neither. Tools in motion were useful. He turned toward the nearest house where 3 chakra signatures still flickered behind a sealed door. The knight's original operation would continue, but now there would be amendments. At the entrance to the Uchiha district, the first Anbu response team arrived and stopped. None of them crossed the threshold. They could hear nothing from inside. No clash of blades, no screams, no fire. Only the impossible silence, and beneath it, the faint sound of a child's sandals moving calmly over stone. The squad captain lifted one hand, signaling halt. His fingers were steady, his heart was not. "What are your orders?" whispered one operative. The captain stared into the district. He thought of the 9 tails. He had been younger then, but he remembered red chakra, shattered buildings, the 4th Hokage's final stand. He remembered destruction given claws. This did not feel like that. The fox had wanted to destroy. Whatever had entered the Uchiha district tonight felt like it had come to inspect property. The captain swallowed. "We wait," he said. No one argued. Naruto reached the main avenue of the Uchiha compound. The district was a map of interrupted lives, doors left open, lanterns burning, meals cooling on tables, training weapons stacked neatly near walls, family banners moving gently in air that should not have been moving at all. The spider appendages extended. One touched a fallen Uchiha's wrist, not to comfort, to read. Information moved through Saturn's awareness, chakra coils, ocular nerves, genetic predisposition, emotional shock residue, spiritual imprint. The Sharingan structure unfolded before him in layers. Interesting, very interesting. The eye was not merely a mutation, it was an interface, crude, yes. Emotional activation made the mechanism unstable. Trauma dependency was inefficient. The blindness risk suggested poor long-term design, but the principle was remarkable. A biological organ capable of perceiving and manipulating layers of reality inaccessible to standard human senses. The sage of 6 paths had left fingerprints everywhere. Saturn's mouth curved faintly, not quite a smile, more like recognition. He moved to the next body, then the next house. Twice he found Uchiha still alive. He did not save them. Saving implied moral investment. He archived them. A touch from the spider limb adjusted their chakra flow, dimmed their panic response, and placed them into a deep, unconscious state. Their bodies lowered gently to the floor as if sleep had taken them mid-breath. They would wake later, changed, perhaps, but alive, useful. By the time he reached the center of the district, he had selected 17, a good starting sample. Not enough for population recovery without careful management, but sufficient for study. In the distance, Itachi's chakra flared. Sasuke's signature appeared beside it, bright, young, unformed. Then came a spike of trauma so sharp that even Saturn paused. Activation pressure. He turned. Itachi stood in the street outside his family home. Sasuke lay unconscious nearby, trapped in the nightmare his brother had given him. Itachi's face remained composed, but something inside him had torn beyond repair. The mission was complete. His clan was gone. His brother lived. His own life, from this moment forward, belonged to exile, hatred, and whatever punishment history eventually invented for men like him. Then the temperature dropped again. Itachi did not turn immediately. He already knew. Naruto stood behind him. Between them, Sasuke slept. For a moment, neither spoke. The red moon watched from above. Finally, Saturn looked down at Sasuke. You preserved this one for suffering. Itachi's jaw tightened. Saturn continued, voice calm, almost approving. Efficient. Trauma is a reliable activation mechanism for latent ocular potential. I would have done the same. Itachi's composure nearly failed, not because the statement was wrong, because it was too close to the truth. Every noble excuse he had built around his decision village stability, Sasuke's survival, future justice, all of it stood suddenly exposed beneath those ocean-dark eyes. A god looked at his sacrifice and saw technique. Nothing more. Do not touch him, Itachi said. The words came out before strategy could stop them. One spider limb lifted. Itachi's Mangekyo burned. The limb paused above Sasuke, then withdrew, not in obedience, in calculation. This specimen is already under active developmental pressure, Saturn said. Interference may degrade outcome. Specimen, Itachi's hands shook once, only once. Saturn stepped past Sasuke, past Itachi, continuing deeper into the district. You may leave, he said. Itachi stared at the small back of the child who was not a child. Why? Saturn did not turn. Tools that believe themselves damned are often productive. For a heartbeat, Itachi could not breathe. Then he vanished into the night, carrying a future made of lies. Dawn came slowly. It did not brighten the Uchiha district so much as reveal it. The first sunlight touched rooftops, banners, empty streets, and the faces of Anbu who had stood frozen at the boundary for hours, waiting for permission from fear itself. When the pressure finally lessened, they entered. What they found would become classified before noon. The massacre had happened. That much was undeniable. But the story was no longer clean. 17 Uchiha survivors lay unconscious in the central courtyard, arranged in a precise geometric pattern. Not bound, not wounded, not guarded, arranged. At the center of the pattern stood Naruto Uzumaki, 8 years old, bare legs pale in the morning cold, hands folded behind his back, eyes dark as the deepest ocean. Around him, faint distortions shimmered in the air, like limbs that had chosen not to exist fully in daylight. The Anbu captain stepped forward. Every survival instinct begged him not to. Naruto Uzumaki, he said carefully. The child turned his head. The full weight of that gaze landed on him. The captain had faced enemy ninja. He had watched comrades die. He had stood before the 9 tails and lived. His knees weakened, not from pain, from recognition. His body understood a hierarchy his mind rejected. The child spoke one word, biological. The captain did not understand, not then. Later, in the report he would deliver directly to the Hokage, he would write that the word had not sounded like speech. It had sounded like a verdict. Behind him, one of the younger Anbu whispered something under his breath. The captain almost reprimanded him. Then he realized the operative was praying. Naruto looked past them toward the village, toward the Hokage Tower, toward the academy, toward the monument carved into the mountain, toward the structures through which this population organized itself. His expression remained calm. Inside him, far beneath the surface, the small boy who had wanted everyone to see him slept in a corner of his own soul. Not gone, not free. Subordinate. The red tint faded from the moon as morning claimed the sky, but everyone who had seen it remembered. And somewhere deep inside the seal, Kurama watched the ancient thing wearing Naruto's face and understood with cold certainty that the world had changed during the night, not because the Uchiha had died, not because Itachi had fled, not because Konoha had committed another secret sin and called it survival. The world had changed because something older than shinobi history had opened its eyes inside the most hated child in the leaf, and it had found the village useful, for now. Chapter 2, Sanctified Ground. A massacre can be hidden, a miracle cannot, and this was not a miracle. By sunrise, the Uchiha district had stopped being part of Konoha, not officially. Officially, it was still a clan compound within the hidden leaf village. Its streets were still paved with the same stone. Its walls still carried the same fan symbol. Its homes still stood under the protection of the Hokage, the village charter, and all the laws written by men who believed laws mattered when power chose not to acknowledge them. But everyone who stood at the entrance that morning understood the truth. The Uchiha district had become something else. A border had appeared where no wall existed, Anbu stood at that border in 3 lines, weapons drawn but lowered, masks turned inward toward the empty streets. None of them wanted to step farther than necessary. None of them wanted to admit that. Their training had prepared them to walk through battlefields, enemy traps, poison mist, illusion barriers, and zones of forbidden sealing techniques. It had not prepared them for a child standing calmly in the middle of a ruined clan compound, looking at the village's most secret soldiers as if they were furniture that had been placed in a slightly inconvenient location. Naruto Uzumaki did not look tired. That was one of the first things the Anbu captain noticed. A normal child, even one with the 9 tails sealed inside him, should have been shaking, crying, confused, screaming for help. A normal child should have asked what happened, why the adults were wearing masks, why the streets were silent, why the Uchiha banners looked so heavy in the morning air. Naruto did none of those things. He stood at the center of a geometric arrangement of 17 unconscious Uchiha survivors, hands folded behind his back, bare arms pale in the cold dawn. His blonde hair was messy from sleep. His clothes were ordinary. He looked physically small enough that any adult could have lifted him with one arm, and yet the space around him belonged to him. The captain felt it with every breath. The district did not feel occupied. It felt claimed. Hokage-sama is on his way, one Anbu whispered. The captain did not look back. Good. His own voice sounded wrong in his ears, too quiet, too careful. He hated that. He was a shinobi of the hidden leaf. He had worn the mask for 12 years. He had carried out missions that would never be written down. He had fought enemies stronger than him and survived by discipline, preparation, and the calm certainty that fear was a tool, not a master. But the pressure pressing against his bones was not fear. Fear asked questions, this gave answers. Kneel, do not move, you are observed. The captain forced himself to take one step forward. The moment his foot crossed the invisible line around the courtyard, the air thickened, every muscle in his body locked, not painfully. Not violently, simply decisively, his knees bent before he could stop them. He caught himself halfway down, one hand slamming against the stone. A lesser shinobi would have fallen fully. He remained crouched, trembling under his own armor. Behind him, several Anbu shifted in alarm. Naruto's eyes moved to him, ocean dark, unblinking. Your body understands faster than your command structure, the child said. The captain's throat tightened. He tried to speak. Nothing came. Naruto tilted his head, studying him. Not with cruelty, that might have been easier. Cruelty was human. Cruelty gave you something to hate. This was assessment. You are attempting to prioritize duty over biological submission response, Naruto continued. Commendable. Inefficient, but commendable. The captain's hand clenched against the stone. He had been insulted before. This did not feel like an insult. It felt like being described. That was worse. What, he forced out, did you do here? For the first time, Naruto looked away from him and toward the unconscious Uchiha arranged around the courtyard. Preservation. The answer hung in the cold air. The captain stared. Preservation. Yes, these people are under Konoha jurisdiction. Naruto looked back at him. The captain felt his heart stop for half a beat. Are they? 2 words, calm, almost curious. But beneath them was a question so vast it made the entire command structure of the village feel suddenly temporary. The Anbu captain had no answer. A ripple moved through the team as another presence arrived. Old Chakra, controlled, disciplined, familiar. The 3rd Hokage landed at the district entrance with 2 senior guards at his back, robes moving softly around him. Hiruzen Sarutobi had dressed quickly, but not carelessly. The white and red Hokage robe sat over his armor. His face was lined with age and sleeplessness. His eyes, however, were sharp enough to understand the scene before anyone explained it. His gaze moved over the district, the bodies, the survivors, the Anbu frozen at the threshold. The child in the center. The old man stopped walking. For one moment, nobody spoke. The 3rd Hokage had seen more horror than most men could survive remembering. He had seen villages burned during the Great Wars. He had seen students become monsters, heroes become corpses, friends become names carved into stone. He had seen the 9 tails with his own eyes, roaring beneath a moon stained red by fire and blood. But this scene chilled him differently. The Nine Tails had been destruction. This was order. That was what frightened him. The massacre should have been chaos. Even a controlled massacre, even one committed by a genius like Itachi, should have left behind the emotional shape of violence. Terror, anger, desperation, disorder. Instead, the center of the Uchiha district looked deranged. Curated, 17 survivors lay unconscious at mathematically precise intervals. Their heads pointed inward. Their arms rested peacefully at their sides. No ropes restrained them. No seals marked their skin. No visible injury explained their state. At the exact center stood Naruto. A lonely child the village had failed for 8 years, and behind his small body, faint distortions shimmered in the air like unseen limbs folding themselves out of respect for no one. Hiruzen's pipe was not in his mouth. For once, he was glad of that. He did not trust his hand to hold it steady. "Naruto," he said gently. The child's gaze shifted. The moment those eyes met his, Hiruzen understood. Whatever stood before him knew the name Naruto. It recognized it. It could answer to it, but it did not belong to it. "Hokage," the child said. No honorific, no childish excitement, no resentment. Just title. Hiruzen felt something in his chest tighten. The old man stepped forward. His guards moved to follow. He lifted one hand, stopping them. "No," he said softly. "Stay. Hokage-sama, stay." The command left no room for argument. Hiruzen crossed the threshold alone. The pressure struck immediately. It was like walking into the deep ocean, not water, not weight in the physical sense, depth. His lungs remembered they were fragile. His bones remembered they were temporary. His chakra, disciplined by decades of mastery, compressed around his core, instinctively protecting itself from a presence that did not attack because attack implied opposition. Hiruzen kept walking one step, then another. His knees ached, not from age, from the desire to bend. The Anbu watched in silence as their Hokage approached the center of the courtyard. Old men did not become old shinobi by ignoring fear. They became old by knowing which fears could be survived, and which could only be negotiated with. Hiruzen stopped 3 meters from Naruto. Close enough to see the child's face clearly, close enough to see the whisker marks, close enough to remember the newborn he had held after the 4th Hokage's death, wrapped in cloth, crying under the weight of a village's future. "Naruto," Hiruzen said again, quieter this time. Something flickered, not in the eyes, not on the face, somewhere deeper. A tiny disturbance behind an ocean, then it vanished. Saturn looked at him through Naruto's face. "You are attempting emotional retrieval." Hiruzen's breath caught. The words were too precise, too accurate. "Where is he?" Hiruzen asked. The courtyard seemed to grow colder. The child considered the question. "Present." Hope struck Hiruzen so suddenly it almost hurt. "Can he hear me?" "Yes." Hiruzen leaned forward, his voice breaking despite himself. "Naruto, listen to me. If you can hear me, hold on. Whatever this is, whatever has happened, you are not alone. Do you understand? You are not enough." The word did not rise in volume. It did not need to. Hiruzen stopped speaking because his body decided speech was no longer authorized. The old man's eyes widened. For the first time in years, Sarutobi Hiruzen felt something close to helplessness. Naruto Saturn watched him. "The vessel's native consciousness remains structurally intact," he said. "It is not damaged. It is not suffering beyond ordinary containment discomfort. It is subordinate." Hiruzen's hands curled inside his sleeves. "He is a child." Yes, the simple agreement was horrifying, not denial, not mockery, agreement without consequence. Hiruzen looked around at the unconscious Uchiha. "What have you done to them? Stabilized them? Why? They are useful." A faint wind moved through the courtyard. One of the Uchiha survivors stirred, then went still again. Hiruzen forced his voice to remain calm. "Useful for what?" Naruto turned slightly, looking at the fan symbol painted on a nearby wall. "Their ocular bloodline is an incomplete biological interface with higher-order perception. It requires study." Every Anbu close enough to hear became very still. Hiruzen's heart sank. Bloodline study. There were few phrases in the shinobi world more dangerous than that. Too many wars had been fought over eyes, bones, blood, and bodies. Too many villages had built their strength by turning inheritance into weaponry. Konoha itself was not innocent. No village was, but what Naruto described was not the hunger of a rival clan. It was not Orochimaru's obsession. It was not Danzo's paranoia. It was colder. A god had found an interesting organ, that was all. Hiruzen stepped closer. The pressure intensified. His back wanted to bow. He did not allow it. "These people are citizens of Konoha," he said. "Survivors of a tragedy. They will be protected." Naruto looked at him for a long moment. Then, very slightly, he smiled. It was the first expression Hiruzen had seen on his face. It was also the least human. You use the language of possession differently when the possessor is yourself. Hiruzen went still. Naruto continued. "Citizens. Clan assets, village security risk, Jinchuriki, rogue, survivor, tool, demon child." The last two words landed like a blade. Hiruzen's face tightened. Naruto watched him carefully. "The village categorizes bodies according to utility and fear. I am not introducing a new principle. I am removing hypocrisy from an existing one." No one spoke. Somewhere in the courtyard, a crow landed on a rooftop. It immediately flew away. Hiruzen suddenly felt very old, because the worst part was not that the being was wrong. The worst part was that it was choosing truths like weapons. He took a slow breath. "What do you want?" The question was surrender disguised as diplomacy. Naruto recognized both layers. "For now," he said, "non-interference. For now." Hiruzen repeated. "Yes, and the survivors, they remain here. That will cause panic. It already has. You cannot expect the village to accept this." Naruto's gaze moved toward the Anbu line, one by one. Masked faces lowered without meaning to. "I do not expect," he said. "I observe adjustment." Hiruzen felt the shape of the future open before him, and it was not a future he knew how to fight. Not yet, perhaps not ever. Then a sound cut through the courtyard, a small, broken gasp. Sasuke Uchiha had woken up. He was lying on cold stone. For a moment, Sasuke did not know where he was. His mind returned in pieces. The street, his brother, red eyes, mother, father, a command to hate, a world breaking inside his skull. He sat up too quickly and nearly fell forward. His body shook violently. His breath came in sharp bursts. His eyes darted around the courtyard, taking in unfamiliar shapes, masked figures, the Hokage's robes, bodies lying in a circle. No, not bodies, people. Alive, his Sharingan was not active. He was too young, too exhausted, too shattered. But something in him sensed chakra faintly, desperately, like a child reaching for a wall in darkness. They were alive, some of them. Then he saw Naruto. Sasuke froze. Naruto stood a few steps away, looking down at him with eyes that did not belong to the loud idiot from class. For one wild second, Sasuke's mind tried to reject the image. Naruto should not be here. Naruto should be yelling, asking stupid questions, smirking like he wanted a fight, looking at Sasuke with that irritating mix of envy and challenge. This Naruto stood like a statue that had learned to breathe. Sasuke's voice came out raw. "What happened?" Hiruzen turned toward him at once. "Sasuke," but Naruto answered first. "Your clan was removed as a political obstacle. Your brother performed the primary execution. 17 specimens were preserved. You were preserved separately for developmental purposes." The courtyard went silent. Hiruzen's eyes sharpened. "Naruto." There was warning in the Hokage's voice. Saturn ignored it. Sasuke stared, his face emptied. A child could only absorb so much before the mind protected itself with stillness. "My brother," Sasuke whispered. "Yes, he killed. Yes." Sasuke's hands clenched. Then the second part of Saturn's statement reached him. "Specimens." His eyes moved to the unconscious survivors. Something between horror and hope twisted across his face. "They're alive." "Yes." Sasuke tried to stand. His legs failed. He crawled toward the nearest survivor, a woman he recognized distantly from clan gatherings. His hand hovered over her shoulder, afraid to touch, afraid she would vanish. "She's alive," he whispered. The words were not relief, not fully. Relief would have been clean. This was confusion wearing relief skin. Hiruzen knelt beside him. "Sasuke, listen to me. You are safe now." Sasuke looked at the Hokage. Something had changed in his eyes. Before this night, Sasuke Uchiha had been proud, lonely, talented, hungry for recognition from one man above all others. Now that hunger had been burned into something sharper. "Where is Itachi?" Hiruzen did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Sasuke looked back at Naruto. "You saw him?" "Yes." "Why didn't you stop him?" A reasonable question, a child's question, a survivor's question. Everyone in the courtyard felt it, even Hiruzen, especially Hiruzen. Naruto looked at Sasuke with calm interest. Because his action generated useful outcomes. Sasuke stared. The words struck him harder than any blow. Hiruzen stood. That is enough. This time, chakra moved in the Hokage's voice, not an attack, authority, the old command of a man who had led armies. For a moment, the air resisted him. Then Naruto turned his eyes back to Hiruzen. The pressure deepened. The Anbu captain dropped fully to one knee. Several others followed, gasping. Hiruzen remained standing barely. Saturn spoke. You are attempting to protect the child from information after the event has already shaped him. This is sentimental inefficiency. He is not yours to shape. Hiruzen said. Naruto's gaze flicked to Sasuke. Everything is shaped by proximity to power. You know this. You built a village around the principle. Hiruzen had no easy answer. Sasuke, still on the ground, looked between them. His world had ended. His brother had become a monster. His clan was dead, but not entirely. Naruto was not Naruto. The Hokage was afraid. The Anbu were kneeling. And somewhere beneath the terror, beneath the grief, a new understanding began to form. The village was not what he thought it was. Power was not where he thought it was. And Naruto Uzumaki, the dead last from class, now stood at the center of everything like a dark sun. Sasuke hated him in that moment. Not the simple classroom hatred of rivalry, something deeper. Because Naruto had seen Itachi and lived. Because Naruto had saved some Uchiha without caring. Because Naruto had spoken the truth with no mercy. Because Naruto had become impossible. Sasuke's fingers dug into the stone. What are you? He whispered. Naruto looked down at him. For a moment, the smallest possible flicker disturbed his expression. Something old considering how much truth a child could survive. Then he answered, inherited authority. Sasuke did not understand, but he remembered the words. He would remember them for years. By mid-morning, the Uchiha district was sealed, not by order of the Hokage alone. That was the official version. In reality, the district sealed itself around Saturn's presence. Barrier teams arrived and attempted to place standard containment formulas around the outer walls. The first set of tags burned black within seconds. The second set remained intact but refused to activate. The third set activated backward, briefly trapping the barrier team outside their own formation until a senior sealing master cut the chakra lines. After that, Hiruzen ordered them to stop. No one argued. The surviving Uchiha were moved only after Saturn permitted it, and even then, moved was not exactly the right word. Anbu teams entered with stretchers, but each survivor had to be carried along a path Saturn indicated with one raised finger. When a medic nin stepped outside the invisible route, she collapsed instantly to her knees, not harmed, merely unable to continue. Saturn watched the process with patient disapproval. Your medical transport protocols are poorly optimized, he said. The medic nin, sweating through her uniform, wisely did not respond. The survivors were taken not to the general hospital, but to a secured wing under Hokage authority. That had been Hiruzen's condition. Saturn's condition was that they remain accessible to him. Neither side called it a compromise. Both understood it was a temporary arrangement. Sasuke was taken separately. He resisted at first, not physically well. He was too weak, but emotionally, violently, with the broken pride of a child who had lost everything and refused to be carried like something fragile. When a medic tried to guide him away from the courtyard, Sasuke turned back toward Naruto. Did you let him go? The question cut through the noise. Hiruzen stopped. The Anbu stopped. Saturn looked at Sasuke. Yes, Sasuke's face twisted. Why? Because he remains useful. Sasuke's breath shook. I'll kill him. Yes, the answer was immediate. Sasuke froze. Saturn continued. That is the developmental trajectory he selected for you. Sasuke looked as if he might be sick. Hiruzen stepped between them. Naruto, stop. Saturn looked at the Hokage. Again, that faint almost smile. You prefer comforting lies. I prefer mercy. Mercy is often delayed cruelty with better branding. Hiruzen said nothing. Sasuke was taken away with those words burned into him. In the hospital later, surrounded by white walls and careful voices, he would replay them again and again. His brother wanted him to hate. The Hokage wanted him protected. Naruto, whatever Naruto had become, wanted nothing. And somehow, that nothing felt like the most honest force in the world. Danzo received the first report in an underground chamber with no windows. He read it once, then again. Then a third time, the root operative who delivered it knelt silently before him. Danzo's face did not change. That was one of the skills age had polished in him. Men like Hiruzen wore their grief in their eyes. Men like Danzo buried everything beneath utility, but even Danzo could not fully hide the slight tightening of his hand around the cane. "Naruto Uzumaki," he said. The operative remained silent. 8 years old. Yes, Danzo-sama. 17 Uchiha survivors. Yes, selected and preserved by the Jinchuriki. So the report states, Danzo's visible eye narrowed, words mattered. Reports were written by frightened men attempting to make fear sound administrative, describe the sensation. The operative hesitated. Danzo's gaze sharpened. Not the report. You were near the district. Describe it. The root operative had no name, not one that mattered. He had been trained to remove unnecessary feeling, unnecessary attachment, unnecessary fear. His voice was usually flat enough to make the dead sound expressive. But when he answered, something moved beneath the words. It was not killing intent, I know that. It was command. Danzo stilled. The operative continued. My body understood surrender as a biological function. I did not choose to resist. I was permitted to remain standing because I was outside the inner radius. A long silence followed. Danzo looked down at the report again. For years, he had argued that Naruto should have been under root supervision. A Jinchuriki was too important to be left to public hatred and the third sentimental negligence. The boy should have been trained, conditioned, shaped into a weapon loyal only to Konoha. Now something else had shaped him first. Danzo's jaw tightened. Unacceptable, dangerous, potentially useful. Those three conclusions arrived together. What of the 9 tails? He asked. No manifestation reported. Chakra leakage, none matching prior records. Danzo's eye narrowed further. A Jinchuriki event without Biju chakra, an Uchiha massacre interrupted but not prevented, survivors selected. The Hokage frightened, the Anbu compromised, and Naruto Uzumaki at the center of it all, no longer behaving like a child. Danzo felt the old machinery of strategy begin turning inside him. If the boy was a threat, he had to be contained. If he could not be contained, he had to be directed. If he could not be directed, he had to be studied from a safe distance until weakness appeared. Everything had weakness. Everything. Gods were simply tyrants with better mythology. Prepare an observation cell, Danzo said. The operative bowed. Distance. Far. How far, Danzo-sama? Danzo looked toward the ceiling, as if he could see through stone, earth, village, and fear to the district above. Farther than pride suggests. In the hospital, the surviving Uchiha slept. Medical scans showed no injury beyond shock, chakra exhaustion, and irregular but stable tenketsu activity. That last detail disturbed the medics most. Their chakra networks had been touched, not damaged, edited. That was the word one young medic accidentally used before an older supervisor told her never to say it again. Edited, as if a person were a scroll. As if the living body were a draft requiring revision. The 17 survivors did not wake immediately. When they stirred, they did so one by one, each surfacing from unconsciousness with the same first reaction. Not screaming, not panic. They opened their eyes and looked toward the east, toward the district, toward Naruto. Even through walls, even under sedation, something in them oriented itself toward the presence that had touched them. The medics noticed. They wrote it down. Then the notes disappeared into classified files before sunset. One woman woke fully near noon. Her name was Uchiha Riene. 32 years old. Chunin ranked, non-combat administrative assignment, 2 Tomo Sharingan. Her husband had not survived the night. Her daughter had not survived the night. When Hiruzen came to speak with her, he expected grief. He found it. Of course he found it. Rina wept until her body shook. She asked questions no one wanted to answer. She said Itachi's name like a curse and a prayer, but beneath the grief was something else, something that made Hiruzen's blood run cold. When Naruto's name was mentioned, Rina became still, not calm, still. He saved me, she whispered. Hiruzen's face tightened. We don't know that. Rina looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, and terribly certain. I remember cold, she said. I remember the street. I remember thinking I was going to die, her hands twisted in the hospital blanket. Then he was there. Naruto, she nodded slowly. But it wasn't Naruto, not the academy boy, not exactly. Hiruzen leaned forward. What did you feel? Riina looked ashamed before she answered. Relief. The word entered the room like poison. Hiruzen said nothing. Riina began crying again, quieter now. I should have been afraid. I was afraid. But when he looked at me, I felt like the choice had been taken away. Like I didn't need to decide whether I lived or died. Something greater had decided I would be kept. Hiruzen closed his eyes, kept, not saved. Kept, there was a difference. Riina understood it too. That was why she cried. Saturn returned to Naruto's apartment at dusk. No one stopped him. Several shinobi followed at a distance. He allowed it. Observation helped populations adjust. The apartment was exactly as he had left it, small, poorly maintained, inefficient use of space, nutritional supplies inadequate. Bedding substandard, security laughable. Emotional residue dense enough to be almost visible. Saturn stood in the doorway for several seconds, examining the room with the same attention he had given the Sharingan. This was the vessel's habitat. No guardians, no supervision. No meaningful social integration. The child had been left alone in a hostile population while containing one of the most powerful chakra entities in existence. Saturn's face remained expressionless. Poor asset management, he said. Inside the seal, Kurama opened one eye. You're offended on logistical grounds. Saturn closed the door behind him. I dislike waste. Kurama's laugh rumbled through the mindscape. You and this village might understand each other better than you think. Saturn ignored the comment and walked to the desk. The notebook was still open. The drawing remained there, a small orange boy on the Hokage monument, arms raised, smiling beneath the words, "Everyone will see me." Saturn looked at it for a long time, longer than necessary. Kurama noticed. Deep inside the seal, the 9 tails shifted. That is his, Kurama said. Saturn did not answer. The spider limbs shimmered faintly behind him, not fully manifesting but present in potential. He turned a page, another drawing, a bowl of ramen with steam rising from it, another, a frog with a sword, another, 2 stick figures fighting. One had black hair. One had yellow hair. Both were smiling angry smiles. The kind children draw when they do not yet know friendship and rivalry are sometimes the same door from different sides. Saturn studied the drawings. The vessel's inner consciousness stirred, small, distant, a pressure, not a voice, mine. Saturn paused. Kurama felt it too for a moment. The apartment seemed colder. Then Saturn closed the notebook, not harshly, carefully. He placed it in the center of the desk. Subordinate, he said. Kurama's voice came from within, low and dangerous. You keep using that word like it makes what you're doing clean. It makes it accurate. No, Kurama said. It makes it easier for you to ignore. Saturn turned toward the window. Outside, Konoha moved in frightened whispers. Civilians had been told to remain indoors near the eastern districts. Shinobi had been told an investigation was ongoing. Academy classes were suspended for 2 days. The official announcement named Itachi Uchiha as the perpetrator of a clan tragedy and asked the village to remain calm. The village did not remain calm. It adjusted, fearfully, quietly. Already, stories had begun. Some said the 9 tails had finally taken Naruto's body. Some said the Uchiha had summoned something and failed to control it. Some said Itachi had not fled the village at all, but had been devoured by the demon brat. Some said the Hokage himself had bowed. That last one was not true, not yet. Saturn listened to the rumors moving through the village like insects beneath bark. Information systems in primitive societies were fascinating. In the absence of truth, fear reproduced. He looked up. The moon had risen, red again, not fully, not bright, but unmistakably stained, as if some distant law of the world had changed, and the sky was still deciding how to display it. Saturn watched it. Inside him, Kurama watched Saturn. And buried far below both of them, Naruto Uzumaki dreamed of standing in a street where everyone looked at him. Not with hatred, not with love, with awe. The dream should have comforted him. It did not, because in the dream, when Naruto looked down at his own hands, they were folded behind his back, still, patient, not his. Hiruzen did not sleep that night. He sat alone in his office after every council member had left, after every report had been sealed, after every argument had exhausted itself against the same impossible wall. Danzo wanted containment. The elders wanted secrecy. The medical division wanted answers. The Anbu wanted orders. The surviving Uchiha wanted explanations no one could safely give. Sasuke wanted Itachi. And Naruto Hiruzen's hand tightened around his cold pipe. Naruto was no longer a question Hiruzen knew how to ask. On his desk lay 3 files. 1. The official Uchiha massacre report. 2. The classified survivor list. 3. Naruto Uzumaki's personal record. He opened the 3rd file. It was painfully thin. Apartment assignment. Academy enrollment. Behavior notes. Public disturbance complaints. Shopkeeper incidents. Graffiti warnings. Nutrition stipend records. Psychological observation requests denied due to confidentiality surrounding Jinchuriki status. A life reduced to administrative neglect. Hiruzen stared at the page for years. He had told himself Naruto was safer in ordinary hardship than in extraordinary attention. The village's hatred was regrettable but manageable. The boy had food, shelter, academy access, occasional visits from the Hokage, better anonymity than becoming a political weapon. That had been the argument. It looked smaller tonight, crueler. A child had been left alone with a monster inside him, and now something older than the monster had found the empty space where love should have been. Hiruzen closed the file. The office felt colder than it should. A crow landed outside the window. It tapped the glass once. Hiruzen looked up. For one absurd moment, he thought of Itachi. Then the crow flew away. The Hokage turned toward the village below. The red moon hung over Konoha. He whispered into the empty office, "Minato, forgive me." No answer came, only the quiet weight of a sleeping god who was no longer sleeping. And in the Uchiha district, now sealed, watched, feared, and forever changed, the wind moved through empty streets that no longer belonged to the dead, the living, or the village. They belonged to the child who had walked in during the massacre. They belonged to the thing wearing his face. They belonged to Saint SATURN. Chapter 3. The gravity of sovereignty. A village can survive a monster at its gates. It is far harder to survive one sitting quietly inside its walls. The official story lasted 6 hours. That was impressive, considering it had been built on a lie before dawn and placed on the village bulletin boards before noon. By order of the Hokage, the announcement was brief. Itachi Uchiha, formerly of the Hidden Leaf, has been declared an S-rank missing nin. He is responsible for the deaths of members of the Uchiha clan. The surviving members are under medical protection. Citizens are advised not to approach the Uchiha district until investigation is complete, clean, direct, controlled. It named a criminal. It named victims. It gave the village a shape to put around the fear. That was what official stories were for. They did not need to be whole. They only needed to be strong enough to keep panic from becoming movement. For 6 hours it worked. Then the first survivor woke. Then the second. Then the third. And each of them remembered the same thing, not Itachi's blade, not the moment of collapse, not the exact shape of their fear. They remembered a child standing in the street beneath a red moon. They remembered cold. They remembered dark blue eyes. They remembered long, impossible limbs unfolding behind him like a spider's shadow. Most disturbing of all, they remembered the feeling that, for one brief moment, their lives no longer belonged to danger. They belonged to him. By sunset, the hospital wing had been sealed behind 3 layers of Anbu security and 2 layers of medical confidentiality. By midnight, the sealing corps had been ordered to burn every first draft report and rewrite the incident in language approved by the Hokage's office. By morning, every rewritten report had already leaked into the hands of people who knew how to read silence between lines. Konoha was a shinobi village. Secrets did not stay buried. They changed owners. The council chamber beneath the Hokage Tower had no windows. That was deliberate. Windows invited performance. Leaders looked out of windows when they wanted to feel the weight of the people below. They looked toward monuments when they wanted history to forgive them. They looked toward the horizon when they wanted to pretend their choices were larger than their own fear. This chamber allowed none of that. There was only a circular table, stone walls, old seals carved into the floor, and the heavy air of men and women who had all convinced themselves they were necessary. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat at the head of the table. To his right sat Hamura and Koharu, the village elders, faces drawn tight with sleeplessness and calculation. To his left sat Danzo Shimura, one visible eye half-lidded, cane resting beneath his palm, bandaged arm hidden beneath his robes. Behind them stood two Anbu. Not enough to stop anyone in the room, enough to witness what was said. That mattered more. Koharu was the first to speak. The official version is failing. Hiruzen did not answer. Hamura adjusted his glasses. The surviving Uchiha are the problem. Their accounts conflict with the necessary narrative. Danzo's cane tapped once against the floor. No, their accounts confirm the narrative's weakness. The problem is Naruto Uzumaki. Hiruzen's gaze sharpened. Choose your words carefully. Danzo did not look away. I always do. The chamber went still for decades. This was how they had worked. Hiruzen with conscience, Danzo with necessity, the elders with preservation, each one claiming to protect Konoha while slowly carving different pieces from its soul. Usually their arguments moved in familiar circles, not today. Today, every path led back to one name, Naruto Uzumaki, 8 years old, Jinchuriki, academy student, village outcast. And now, according to every credible report, the center of a phenomenon no known classification could contain. Koharu folded her hands. What exactly are we calling this? No one answered quickly. That alone was dangerous. A shinobi village survived by naming threats. Missing nin, biju, keke genkai, forbidden jutsu, curse mark, sage mode, would release. Every category was a box built around fear. Once something had a name, it could be studied. Once studied, it could be countered. Once countered, it could be survived. Naruto SATURN did not fit any box. Hiruzen finally spoke. We are not calling it anything publicly. That is not an answer, Hamura said. It is the only answer that does not set fire to the village. Danzo leaned forward slightly. The village is already burning, slowly, quietly. That makes it more dangerous, not less. Hiruzen's voice hardened. You sent observers. Danzo did not deny it. I sent distance observers. None approached. After I ordered no unauthorized action near Naruto. Observation is not action. It is when you do it. For the first time, Danzo's mouth tightened. Koharu cut in before the old argument could awaken fully. The issue is containment. Can he be contained? Hiruzen looked at her. No. The answer landed heavily. Hamura frowned. You say that too quickly. I stood 3 meters from him. Danzo's visible eye narrowed, and Hiruzen's hand rested on the table. The fingers were steady, only because he forced them to be. And every instinct I possessed told me that if he wished me on my knees, I would be there. No one spoke. The third Hokage had admitted weakness, not political weakness, not age, not regret, powerlessness in that chamber from that man. It sounded almost obscene. Danzo's cane tapped again. Then all the more reason to act before he matures further. Hiruzen turned slowly. Act how? Danzo's silence was answer enough. Hiruzen's chakra rose, not violently, not visibly. But the Anbu behind him straightened as if a storm had entered the room. You will not touch that child. That child may no longer exist in any meaningful operational sense. He exists, buried beneath what? Hiruzen's jaw tightened. Danzo pressed on. You heard the reports. His speech, his behavior, the pressure field, the effect on trained personnel. The Uchiha survivors are already showing signs of psychological dependency. The 9 tails is either suppressed or cooperating. We do not have a child. We have a hostile sovereign intelligence wearing village property. The final phrase struck the room hard. Village property. Hiruzen stood. The movement was slow, but everyone felt the danger in it. Naruto Uzumaki is not property. Danzo looked up at him. Then why was he left alone? The words cut through the chamber like a blade drawn without sound. Hiruzen froze. Danzo did not raise his voice. That made it worse. If he was a child, why did he live without guardians? If he was a citizen, why was he denied ordinary protection? If he was not property, why was his identity classified according to village utility? Koharu looked away. Hamura closed his eyes briefly. Hiruzen said nothing. Danzo leaned back. I do not say this to accuse you, Hiruzen. I say it because sentimental language will kill us. We treated him as an asset when it suited us, and as a child when guilt demanded it. Whatever has awakened inside him appears to understand that hypocrisy very well. Hiruzen's hand curled into a fist. For one moment, the old Hokage looked every year of his age, then he sat back down. What do you propose? Danzo's answer came immediately. Distance, surveillance, psychological mapping, identify triggers, identify limits, determine whether the original Naruto consciousness can be reached and used as leverage. Hiruzen's eyes flashed. Used. Yes, that is a child. That may be the only surviving restraint inside a being none of us can restrain externally. The chamber fell silent again. This time, Hiruzen could not dismiss the logic. He hated that. He hated it because Danzo was not entirely wrong. If Naruto remained inside, if the boy still existed beneath that ancient presence, then reaching him mattered. Morally, yes, but also strategically. A village could not survive by refusing to understand the only possible weakness in the power living inside it. Hiruzen closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were tired. We observe, he said. We do not provoke. We do not approach without authorization. We do not attempt containment. We do not attempt extraction. We do not send root. Danzo said nothing. Hiruzen's voice lowered. I mean it. Danzo met his eyes. For once, he gave the closest thing he had to agreement. As you command, Hokage. No one in the room believed that was the end of it. Naruto returned to the academy 3 days after the massacre. That was not Hiruzen's decision. It was Naruto's. Iruka Umino discovered this at 8:02 in the morning when the classroom door opened, and Naruto Uzumaki walked in as if nothing had happened. Every child turned. Conversation died instantly. Before that week, Naruto's arrival usually brought noise. Complaints, groans, a paper ball thrown by someone brave only because the teacher was present. Naruto would normally respond with a grin too big for his face, shout something about becoming Hokage, and turn the entire room into a small disaster before the lesson began. Today, he entered silently. His clothes were clean, his posture was straight, his eyes were dark blue. He walked to his seat near the back and sat down. No announcement, no prank, no demand for attention. The silence stretched. Iruka stood at the front of the room with chalk still in his hand. He had been briefed, not fully. No teacher outside the Hokage's inner circle had been fully briefed. But he had been told enough to be careful. Enough to know that the child in his classroom had been present in the Uchiha district. Enough to know that Sasuke would not be attending for some time. Enough to know that if Naruto displayed unusual behavior, Iruka was to end class calmly and notify the administration. Unusual behavior. Iruka almost laughed. Nothing in the room was usual anymore. Naruto, he said carefully. Naruto looked at him. Iruka forgot the next word. Not because of fear alone, because those eyes made him suddenly aware of every careless thing he had ever thought about the boy. Every frustrated sigh. Every time he had written attention-seeking on a report because it was easier than writing lonely. Every time he had treated Naruto's loudness as a problem to manage instead of a message to hear. The child watched him patiently. Iruka swallowed. You're back. Yes. Some of the students flinched at the voice. It sounded like Naruto. It didn't feel like him. Kiba and Yuzuka, sitting near the window, leaned closer to Akamaru. The puppy had crawled inside his jacket and refused to come out. Shino's insects were unusually still beneath his collar. Hinata Hyuga stared down at her desk, face pale, Byakugan inactive but body tense. Sakura looked at the empty seat where Sasuke should have been, then at Naruto, then away. Iruka forced himself to continue. All right. Open your books to page. Your curriculum is inaccurate. The chalk snapped in Iruka's hand. A few students gasped. Iruka turned slowly. Naruto sat with both hands folded on the desk. What? Your explanation of chakra formation is incomplete. Iruka stared. The day's lesson had been basic chakra theory, physical energy, spiritual energy, balanced and molded through hand signs, standard academy material. Naruto continued. You present chakra as a two-component internal synthesis. This is acceptable for children but insufficient as truth. It ignores inherited spiritual architecture, non-human chakra reservoirs, parasitic soul imprints, divine authority layers, and externalized network consciousness. No one moved. Iruka's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He had no idea what to say. A student in the middle row whispered, "What does parasitic mean?" Nobody answered. Naruto tilted his head slightly. "Would you like me to continue?" Iruka found his voice. No, the answer came too quickly. He corrected himself. "I mean, not right now. We are covering the Academy Foundation first. Naruto considered that, then nodded once. Foundations are useful when properly labeled as such. He looked down at his book. Class resumed technically. For the next 40 minutes, Iruka taught with the constant sensation of standing beside a sleeping cliff. Every time he made a simplification, he felt Naruto notice. Every time he skipped complexity for the sake of children, he felt those ocean-dark eyes quietly record the omission. Naruto did not disrupt class. That was the most disturbing part. He behaved perfectly, answered when called upon, did not speak out of turn, completed the written exercise in clean handwriting, nothing like his old scrawl. When a boy too rose ahead, muttered, "Demon freak." Under his breath, Naruto did not react. The boy who said it did. He stopped breathing for 4 seconds. His pencil fell from his hand. His eyes filled with tears he clearly did not understand. Then Naruto turned one page in his book and the pressure lifted. Iruka ended class early. No one complained. Hiruzen visited Naruto's apartment that evening. He came without robes, no Hokage hat, no escort visible. No pipe, just an old man in plain shinobi clothes standing outside a door he should have knocked on more often over the past 8 years. He raised his hand. Before he touched the wood, Naruto spoke from inside. "Enter." Hiruzen closed his eyes briefly, then opened the door. The apartment was cleaner than he remembered. That realization hurt, not because it was impressive, because the difference exposed the before. The ramen cups had been stacked and removed. The floor had been swept. The sink no longer smelled of old pipes and spoiled leftovers. The thin blanket was folded with military precision. Naruto's notebook sat in the center of the desk, closed. Naruto sat at the small kitchen table. He had prepared tea, or something like tea. The cup in front of Hiruzen's empty chair steamed faintly, though the kettle on the counter was cold. Hiruzen stepped inside and shut the door. "You expected me?" "Yes." Hiruzen sat. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Outside, villagers moved carefully through the evening, pretending the world had not changed. Inside, an old man and a child who was not only a child sat across from each other beneath a light that flickered every few moments. Hiruzen looked at the tea. "Is it safe?" "No." His hand paused. Naruto continued, "It is not poisoned, but your cardiovascular system is old and the stimulant concentration may produce discomfort." Hiruzen stared. Then, despite everything, a tired laugh escaped him. It was small, bitter, almost human. Naruto watched the reaction with interest. "You find the distinction amusing. I find many things less amusing than I used to." Hiruzen pushed the cup aside. "Naruto." The child's expression did not change. "I have questions." "Yes." "Will you answer them?" "That depends on whether the answer interferes with my interests." "At least you are honest. Dishonesty is useful only when truth produces resistance. You are already resisting." Hiruzen leaned back. There it was again, the surgical accuracy, no anger, no boasting, no threat, just the removal of every comforting illusion. "Who are you?" Hiruzen asked. The apartment grew colder, not dramatically, enough for the steam above the tea to thin. Naruto looked toward the window. The red moon had not yet risen, but the sky already carried a faint darkening near the horizon. "Names are administrative tools," he said. "Then give me the tool." A pause. "Saturn." Hiruzen's brow furrowed. The name meant nothing in any shinobi record he knew. "Saturn," he repeated. "Yes. Are you a demon?" "No." "A spirit?" "Insufficient." "A god?" For the first time, Naruto looked back at him. "That depends on the population defining the term." Hiruzen felt his stomach tighten. "That is not a denial." "No." The old Hokage studied him. "And Naruto," the temperature dropped further. Saturn's gaze sharpened by a fraction. A tiny change, but Hiruzen noticed. He had built a lifetime on noticing tiny changes. The native consciousness remains. "Can I speak to him?" "No." "Can he speak to me?" "No." "Will that always be true?" Silence. It was the first question Saturn did not answer immediately. Hope moved through Hiruzen's chest before he could stop it. Small, dangerous. Saturn noticed that too. "You are attempting to identify restoration potential." "Yes." "Your guilt is making you optimistic." Hiruzen's hands tightened around his knees. "My guilt is none of your concern. It is structurally relevant." "To what?" "The decisions you will make." The old man looked away. The apartment felt too small for what sat inside it. Hiruzen forced himself back to the matter at hand. "What do you want from Konoha?" continued function. That is not an answer. It is my answer. You walked into the Uchiha district during a massacre, preserved 17 survivors, altered their chakra networks, returned to your apartment, and resumed academy attendance. That is not the behavior of someone who only wants the village to continue functioning. Saturn looked almost approving. Correct, but it is my immediate requirement. And after that, access, 2. Records concerning the Sage of Six Paths, tailed beast distribution history, sealing archives, Uchiha bloodline documentation, Senju biological records, Uzumaki sealing theory. Hiruzen went still. You ask for the most protected knowledge in the village. Yes. Why? Saturn's eyes darkened. Because this world contains fragments of an old machine, and your species has been using them as weapons without understanding their design. Hiruzen did not like the sound of that, the tailed beasts. Among other things, you intend to free them, no, control them, primitive framing. Hiruzen's voice hardened. They are living beings, yes, and Naruto carries one of them. Saturn's gaze shifted inward for the briefest instant. Kurama is aware of his current classification. Hiruzen's blood chilled. You speak with the 9 tails. Yes, and he obeys you. Another pause. This one carried faint amusement. He is not pleased. For some reason, that answer frightened Hiruzen less, not much, but slightly. If Kurama still resisted, if he still argued, then everything inside Naruto had not become one seamless authority. There were divisions, tensions, perhaps even cracks. Saturn watched the thought form. You should not mistake internal disagreement for weakness. Hiruzen exhaled slowly. Do you read minds? No, you are expressive. The old man almost laughed again. He did not. Instead, he leaned forward. Listen to me carefully. Konoha will not survive open panic. The Uchiha massacre has already wounded this village deeply. If you force too much too quickly, people will react badly. Yes, you understand that. Yes, and you don't care. I care about outcomes. Panic is inefficient. Rebellion is wasteful. Worship is premature. Therefore, gradual adjustment is preferable. Hiruzen stared at the child across from him. You speak of my people like livestock. No. Saturn said calmly. Livestock are simpler. For a moment, Hiruzen saw red, not fear, anger, old, hot, human anger. His chakra flared, the light overhead burst. The apartment plunged into dim, evening shadow. Saturn did not move. Hiruzen's breath came heavier. He had faced enemies. Monsters. Traitors. His own failures. But sitting across from a being that reduced Konoha his home, his students, his dead, his living, his mistakes, his love to administrative behavior nearly broke something inside him. Then, from the desk, a page shifted, the notebook. It had fallen partly open when the light burst. A childish drawing was visible in the dimness. A bowl of ramen beside it, written in messy letters. Old man Hawkage buys the good one. Hiruzen saw it, so did Saturn. The anger drained from the room. For a moment, neither spoke. Hiruzen's voice, when it came, was rough. He cared about you. Saturn looked at the notebook. The vessel formed attachment to recurring authority figures. He cared about you, Hiruzen repeated. Saturn's eyes remained on the drawing. Something in the room shifted, not emotion, not exactly. A calculation meeting an inconvenience it could not fully classify. Then Saturn stood. This meeting is complete. Hiruzen did not move. I am not finished. You are. The pressure returned, not enough to crush, enough to remind. Hiruzen stood slowly, old bones protesting. At the door, he turned back. If Naruto is still in there, then I will keep speaking to him. Saturn looked at him. That is your choice. Yes, Hiruzen said. It is. He left the apartment. Only when the door shut did he realize his hands were shaking. Inside, Saturn stood still for a long time. Then he walked to the desk and closed the notebook. Carefully. Danzo waited 4 nights. That was restraint by his standards. On the 5th night, Root moved, not to attack, not officially. 4 operatives entered Naruto's building from 4 different angles. No chakra flares, no killing intent, no weapons drawn. Their mission parameters were limited. Proximity assessment, seal scan, behavioral observation, retreat if detected. Danzo had obeyed the letter of Hiruzen's order. He had not authorized contact, but Root had been built in the space between words. The first operative entered through the roof access. The second through a neighboring apartment. The third through the maintenance crawlspace. The fourth approached from the street, disguised as a drunk civilian staggering home late. All four reached the outer radius at the same time. All four collapsed, not dramatically, no scream, no explosion. One moment, they were elite instruments of Konoha's shadow. The next, they were on their knees, palms flat against the floor, heads lowered. Inside his apartment, Naruto sat at the table, reading a history scroll Hiruzen had not authorized him to possess. He did not look up. The root operative in the crawlspace tried to move. His body refused, not frozen, corrected, like disobedience had been removed from the list of available actions. The operative's training activated. Pain resistance. Mental partition. Emergency chakra spike. Nothing worked. A voice came through the wall. You may retreat. The operative's heart pounded once. He had not felt fear in years. Root removed fear early, or claimed to. But now, kneeling in dust beneath an apartment floor, he felt something older than fear return to him from a place training had never reached. The voice continued. Inform Danzo Shimura that repeated testing will be treated as intent, not curiosity. The operative's mouth moved before his mind approved. Yes, across the building, the other three said the same word at the same time. Yes. Then the pressure lifted. All four retreated. None spoke until they reached Root headquarters. Danzo listened to the report in silence. When it ended, he dismissed them. Alone, he remained seated for a long time. Then, slowly, he smiled, not with pleasure, with confirmation. There were rules. Anything with rules could be studied. Anything that could be studied could eventually be used, or killed. The next morning, Naruto walked to the Hokage Tower. He did not sneak. He did not request an escort. He simply left his apartment after breakfast, crossed the village, and entered the administrative district, while every shinobi on duty discovered urgent reasons not to stand in his way. By the time he reached the tower steps, Hiruzen already knew, so did Danzo. So did the elders. So did half the village, because people had begun watching Naruto the way villagers watch storm clouds that move against the wind. Naruto climbed the stairs. At the reception desk, a Chunin opened her mouth to ask his business. The words died. Naruto passed her. The Hokage secretary stood quickly. Hokage-sama is in a council meeting. I know. Naruto opened the door. Inside, Hiruzen, Danzo, Himura, Koharu, and 3 department heads turned toward him. No one had invited him. No one asked him to leave. Naruto walked to the center of the room and stopped before the Hokage's desk. The room seemed to shrink around him. Hiruzen remained seated. It was one of the bravest things anyone did that day. Naruto, he said. Saturn, Danzo corrected softly. Hiruzen's eyes moved to him. Danzo did not look away. Naruto ignored the exchange. I am formalizing operational requirements. Koharu's face tightened. This is a restricted meeting. Yes. The single word made the restriction feel childish. Himura cleared his throat. You cannot simply enter the Hokage's office and make demands. Naruto looked at him. Himura stopped breathing, not fully, just enough to understand how voluntary breathing had been until that moment. Hiruzen's voice sharpened. Naruto. The pressure eased. Himura inhaled hard, one hand gripping the table. Saturn returned his gaze to Hiruzen. Your governance structures will remain intact. No one spoke. Konoha will continue its mission system, academy instruction, economic activity, civilian administration, and defensive operations. I have no current interest in managing routine human organization. Danzo's visible eye narrowed. Generous. Naruto looked at him. Accurate. Danzo inclined his head slightly. Saturn continued. My requirements are as follows. 1. Unrestricted access to surviving Uchiha under medically stable conditions. 2. Unrestricted access to historical records concerning the Sage of 6 Paths, tailed beast distribution, and clan bloodline evolution. 3. No hostile action by Root, Anbu, clan forces, or independent village assets against my person, the vessel, or designated research subjects. Koharu's face went pale at the word vessel. Hiruzen stood. You will not conduct experiments on the survivors. Saturn looked at him. Define experiment. Do not play word games. I am requesting operational clarity. Hiruzen's voice hardened. You will not harm them. Harm degrades data. That is not enough. It is what you have. The room went silent. Hiruzen's fingers curled around the edge of his desk. Danzo watched carefully. The elders watched Hiruzen. The department heads watched the floor. Everyone understood that this was the moment. Not because anyone could defeat Saturn here, because the shape of Konoha's pride was being decided. Would the Hokage refuse and expose the village's helplessness? Would he agree and admit it? Hiruzen looked at Naruto's face, at the whisker marks, at the small body standing beneath impossible authority, at the child he had failed. Then he looked past him toward the window, where the village spread beneath the mountain. People still had to eat, children still had to attend school, shinobi still had to guard borders. The dead still had to be buried. A Hokage's first duty was not pride, it was survival. Hiruzen sat down. You will have supervised access. Saturn's eyes narrowed slightly. A dangerous stillness entered the room. Hiruzen did not look away. Medically supervised, Hokage authorized. No invasive procedures without my approval. Danzo's eyebrow lifted faintly. The elders looked alarmed. Saturn was silent. Hiruzen felt sweat gather at the back of his neck. He continued anyway. You will have records access in stages. Nothing leaves the archive. Nothing is copied without review. As for hostile action, I will issue the order. His gaze shifted briefly to Danzo. All branches will obey it. Danzo gave no reaction. Saturn studied Hiruzen for a long moment. Then the pressure in the room changed, not vanished, adjusted, acceptable as temporary framework. Hiruzen exhaled slowly. Koharu looked like she might collapse with relief. Hamura wiped his glasses with a hand that trembled. Danzo looked almost amused. Temporary, he said. Saturn turned toward him. All structures are temporary. Danzo's smile faded. For the first time, perhaps, he heard in that sentence not philosophy, but promise. Saturn walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. There is one further correction. Hiruzen looked up. What correction? Saturn glanced back. The child is not to be referred to as village property again. The room froze. Danzo's visible eye sharpened. Hiruzen went still. Saturn's expression remained empty. The term is imprecise. Then he left. No one moved for several seconds. Hiruzen closed his eyes. Because beneath the terror, beneath the politics, beneath the unbearable weight of compromise, one fact had just placed itself quietly on the table. Saturn had objected, not morally, not emotionally, but he had objected. And in a situation like this, even imprecision could be a crack. That night, Hiruzen wrote in his private journal. He had kept journals since the First War. Most entries were practical. Mission summaries, casualty reflections, political concerns, names of the dead. He did not trust official monuments to remember properly. This entry took longer. His brush hovered over the paper for several minutes before he wrote the first line. I have made covenants with demons before. He stopped. The candle beside him flickered. Outside, the village slept badly. Hiruzen continued. I thought I understood the shape of that bargain. A demon wants something. Freedom, blood, revenge, recognition. Hunger gives negotiation its edges. His hand tightened. This is different. The ink darkened where the brush paused. This wants everything and is patient enough to take it piece by piece. He looked toward the window. The moon had risen red again. Not as red as the night of the massacre, but enough that no one could pretend it was normal. Hiruzen dipped the brush once more. Naruto remains. I believe this because I must. Jiraiya must be recalled immediately. If there is any person alive foolish enough to keep speaking to a buried child beneath the gaze of a god, it is him. For the first time that night, the old man almost smiled. Then the smile faded. He added one final line. If we cannot defeat Saturn, then we must preserve the world Naruto would have wanted to return to. Even if he never returns. Hiruzen closed the journal. Above Konoha, the red moon watched without judgment. In a small apartment across the village, Naruto Saturn sat awake at his desk, reading forbidden history by moonlight. Inside the seal, Kurama watched him. And far beneath them both, in the smallest protected corner of the soul, a boy dreamed of a classroom, a bowl of ramen, and an old man calling his name like it still belonged to him. Chapter 4. The collector's taxonomy. The most terrifying prison is not the one with chains. It is the one where the prisoner begins to feel grateful for the cage. In the weeks after the Uchiha massacre, Konoha learned a new kind of quiet, not peace. Peace had warmth in it. Peace allowed children to run too loudly through the streets and merchants to argue over prices and old men to complain about rain that had not yet fallen. Peace had ordinary carelessness. This quiet was different. It was the quiet of people choosing their words before speaking. The quiet of shinobi rooftops, emptying whenever one small blonde boy walked below. The quiet of academy students, pretending not to stare. The quiet of a village that had survived wars, beasts, betrayals, and funerals, only to discover that the most dangerous thing inside its walls was not attacking anyone. It was attending class. Naruto Uzumaki returned to routine with perfect discipline. That was the first adaptation. He woke at the same time each morning. He cleaned his apartment. He ate enough to maintain the vessel's growth, but not enough to indulge its preferences. He walked to the academy by the same route, not because it was fastest, but because repetition allowed observation. Patterns emerged quickly. The baker on the corner stopped sweeping whenever Naruto passed and stared at the ground until he was gone. 3 civilian mothers pulled their children indoors if they saw him from more than half a street away. 2 Chunin followed him from a distance every morning, switching rooftops every 3rd day as if variation could hide intention. The old ramen stand owner still watched him longer than others did, but unlike the rest, his eyes carried concern instead of fear. That was noted. Attachment residue from the vessel's native consciousness reacted strongly to that location. Also noted, Saturn did not enter the ramen stand. Not yet. Some variables were best left undisturbed until their use became clear. At the academy, Naruto sat in the same seat he had always used, back row. Left side, near the window. Before the awakening, he had chosen it because it allowed him to whisper, nap, throw paper, and watch the village outside when lessons became boring. Now Saturn chose it because it gave him sightlines to all exits, full view of classroom social groupings, and easy monitoring of the Hyuga girl whose ocular bloodline presented useful comparative data. Hinata Hyuga noticed his attention once, only once. Her shoulders stiffened and her pale eyes dropped to her desk. Her fingers twisted together until her knuckles whitened. Saturn observed the response without comment: fear, admiration, pity, residual childhood attachment. The Hyuga girl had looked at Naruto before the awakening as if his existence answered a question she was too timid to ask aloud. Interesting, but not immediately relevant. Sasuke's seat remained empty. That absence was louder than most sounds in the classroom. Children glanced at it constantly. Sakura stared at it with red eyes and clenched hands. Ino pretended not to. Kiba whispered less than usual. Shikamaru slept with one eye cracked open, which meant he was not sleeping at all. Uruka continued teaching. That, in Saturn's view, was one of the instructor's more impressive traits. The man was frightened. His chakra fluctuated every time Naruto answered a question. His heartbeat accelerated whenever Saturn corrected a simplification. His grief over the Uchiha incident remained unresolved, and his guilt toward Naruto had increased by 43% since the first post-massacre class. Yet he continued teaching. Humans often mistook emotional persistence for weakness. Sometimes it functioned as durability. Today we'll continue with clone technique theory, Uruka said, writing on the board. His handwriting was slightly uneven. The Bunshin no Jutsu requires evenly distributed chakra projection. If the chakra is too thin, the clone collapses. If it is too dense, the projection destabilizes. Several students began taking notes. Naruto did not. Uruka noticed. He tried not to fail. Naruto, he said carefully. Would you like to explain the basic principle? The room went still. Before the awakening, this question would have produced laughter. Naruto had failed the clone technique more times than anyone. His clones were famous for collapsing like wet paper. Now no one laughed. Naruto looked at the board. The Academy clone is not a clone, he said. Uruka paused. It is a visual projection. Yes, mislabeling produces conceptual weakness. A clone implies independent physical agency. This technique creates a fragile illusionary shell with limited sensory utility and no meaningful combat application. It is therefore better understood as a distraction mirage. A few students blinked. Shikamaru's visible eye sharpened. Uruka inhaled slowly. That is, technically more advanced terminology than we need. It is more accurate. We teach the foundation first. You teach children inaccurate language and require them to repair it later. Iruka's jaw tightened. A few weeks ago, he might have snapped at Naruto for being disrespectful. Now he chose patience, partly from compassion, partly from fear, and partly because he knew the worst thing he could do was make the classroom feel like a battlefield. Sometimes, Iruka said. A simple explanation helps people begin. Naruto looked at him. Sometimes simplicity becomes a cage. Iruka said nothing. The class did not breathe. Then Naruto looked back down at the blank page in front of him. The lesson continued. After class, Iruka found the page left on Naruto's desk. It was not blank anymore. There was a diagram of the clone technique drawn in precise lines, with 7 errors in the Academy textbook's explanation marked and corrected. Beneath it was a second diagram proposing a more stable version of the technique that used a fraction of the chakra and could maintain shape in high wind conditions. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, Naruto had written, "Instructional material requires revision. Current version encourages incompetence." Iruka stared at it for a long time. He wanted to be offended. Instead, he folded the paper carefully and took it to the Hokage. The Uchiha survivors were moved back into the district at the end of the first month. It was described as a compassionate decision. That was not completely false. The hospital was sterile, guarded, and suffocating. The survivors needed familiar walls, familiar streets, and some fragment of home not reduced to memory. Returning them to the district allowed them dignity, privacy, and proximity to the graves that would be marked once the official funerals were completed. But compassion was only one layer. The deeper truth was that the district had become the only place where Saturn permitted reliable access. The surviving Uchiha were housed in a renovated section near the central courtyard. Damaged homes were sealed off, streets were cleaned, broken doors were replaced. The clan archives were guarded by Anbu and watched by Saturn's presence so intensely that even Danzo's agents did not approach them. The survivors called it recovery. Some of the Anbu called it containment. Saturn called it preservation. The difference mattered less each week. At first, the Uchiha feared him. That was expected. They remembered the night. Not fully, but enough. A child in the streets, cold hands of invisible authority, long spider limbs touching chakra networks with impossible precision. The sensation of being read, measured, selected. Fear was rational. But fear changed when the feared thing did not harm them. Saturn visited every 3 days, always at the same hour, always without escort. He would enter the restored hall where the survivors gathered and sit across from them like a physician, examiner, judge, and archivist combined. His spider appendages rarely manifested fully now. Usually they appeared as faint distortions, barely visible until one reached forward to touch a wrist, a temple, or the space near an eye. The first week, several Uchiha flinched. By the third week, only some did. By the 6th, 2 of them offered their hands before being asked. That concerned Hiruzen more than open terror would have, because terror resisted, gratitude adapted. Uchiha Riina was the first to speak to Saturn willingly. She had lost her husband and daughter. Grief had hollowed her cheeks and dimmed her eyes, but it had not broken her mind. Her Sharingan awakened more frequently now, not from combat, but from dreams. The medics believed trauma had destabilized her ocular chakra. Saturn believed the shock had opened an evolutionary threshold and left it untrained. One evening, as red moonlight filtered through the paper screens, Riina sat across from him with her hands folded in her lap. "Why did you choose me?" she asked. Saturn looked at her. Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. "Your optic structure carried a recessive pattern useful for comparative study." Riina swallowed. "So it wasn't mercy." No, the answer should have wounded her. It did, but it also steadied her. There was no lie to push against. No comforting softness hiding a hook. Saturn's cruelty, if it could be called that, had the clean edge of weather. He did not pretend to love what he preserved. Riina looked down. "I think that's easier." Hiruzen, observing from the edge of the room, felt his stomach twist. Saturn tilted his head. "Explain." Riina's hands tightened. "If you said you saved me because you cared, I'd hate you. Because then I'd have to ask, why not my daughter? Why not my husband? Why not everyone?" Her voice cracked. "But if I was just useful," she stopped. The room remained silent. Saturn waited. Riina laughed once, bitter and broken. Then at least the universe didn't choose me because I deserved it. Hiruzen closed his eyes. This was the danger, not mind control, not genjutsu, meaning. Saturn offered a terrible kind of meaning, and wounded people were vulnerable to meaning, even when it came from a monster. Saturn spoke. You mistake selection for value. Rihanna looked up. Is there a difference? Yes. What is it? Value implies purpose beyond function. Selection identifies function. Rihanna absorbed this. Then, quietly, she said, can function become purpose? Hiruzen opened his eyes. Saturn did not answer immediately. The delay was small. But Hiruzen noticed. Finally, Saturn said, in humans, often. Rihanna nodded. That night, she slept without sedation for the first time since the massacre. Hiruzen read the medical report at dawn and felt no relief. Sasuke returned to the Uchiha district only once before the funeral rites. He was supposed to remain under hospital supervision. He escaped through a window, evaded 2 Chunin watchers with the instinctive stealth of a child born to shinobi genius, and reached the compound just before sunset. No one stopped him at the outer boundary. The Anbu saw him. They let him pass, some out of pity, some because none of them wanted to be the one to physically restrain the last direct heir of the clan on the road to his own dead. Sasuke walked through the district with shaking hands. Every street was wrong, too clean in some places, too damaged in others. Some doors had been repaired, some homes sealed with black cloth. The clan's symbol still hung on walls, but now it looked less like pride and more like an eye that had watched everything and done nothing. He reached the central courtyard. Saturn was there. Of course he was. Naruto sat beneath the old clan meeting hall's outer roof, reading from a scroll taken from the Uchiha archive. 2 survivors sat nearby, not speaking. One of them was a boy barely older than Sasuke. His eyes followed Saturn with an expression Sasuke could not understand and immediately hated. Trust, not full trust, not love, but the beginning of reliance. Sasuke's fists clenched. What are you doing here? He demanded. Saturn did not look up from the scroll, reading. This is my clan's district. Yes, you don't belong here. Saturn turned a page. Belonging is a social claim, not a physical limitation. Sasuke's whole body shook. Stop talking like that. The 2 survivors flinched. Saturn looked up. His ocean-dark eyes settled on Sasuke. The pressure came with them. Sasuke felt his knees weaken. He locked them. Hatred helped, grief helped more. For one brief moment, the Sharingan flickered in his eyes, one Tamo, unstable, born of pain too deep for his body to process cleanly. Saturn observed it at once. Activation under emotional stress. Predictable. Sasuke's face twisted. I'm not one of your experiments, no. The answer came too quickly. Sasuke froze. Saturn closed the scroll. You are already under another man's experiment. The words struck like a physical blow. Itachi. Sasuke saw red. He lunged, no plan, no technique, just a child throwing himself at the impossible because there was nowhere else for the pain to go. He made it 3 steps, then stopped, not because Saturn moved, because the air said no. Sasuke's body locked in place. 1 foot forward, 1 arm half raised. Teeth clenched so hard his jaw hurt. He could still breathe. He could still think. He could still hate. He simply could not advance. Saturn stood and walked toward him slowly. Sasuke's unstable Sharingan spun, trying to track, trying to understand. It saw chakra around Naruto, but not properly. It saw darkness folded into blue. It saw lines that seemed to pass behind the world instead of through it. Blood welled in the corner of Sasuke's eye. Saturn stopped in front of him. You want power? Sasuke glared. No denial was possible. Saturn continued. You believe power will allow revenge. You believe revenge will restore internal order. It will not, but pursuit will strengthen you. Sasuke's breath came sharp through his nose. I'll kill him. Yes, I'll kill you too. One of the survivors gasped. Saturn only studied him. Ambition beyond capacity, common in children. Occasionally useful. Sasuke's hatred sharpened into humiliation. The pressure lifted. He staggered but did not fall. That mattered to him. Saturn noticed that too. Train, Saturn said. Sasuke spat the word back like poison. What? Train. Hate alone produces instability. Instability produces waste. If you intend to pursue your brother, become more than his intended consequence. Sasuke stared. For one impossible second, the advice sounded almost like something Naruto might have said if Naruto had been colder, crueler, and smarter than any child had the right to be. Then the moment passed. Sasuke turned away. I don't need you. No, Saturn said, but you will measure yourself against me anyway. Sasuke stopped walking. Saturn's voice remained calm. Your brother made himself your horizon. I have already replaced it. Sasuke did not turn around. But his shoulders went rigid. The words were true. That was why they hurt. He left the district before dark. From that night on, Sasuke trained until his hands bled. Not because Saturn commanded it, because somewhere inside him, a new fear had joined his hatred of Itachi. The fear that revenge against his brother might not be enough to matter anymore. Inside Naruto's mindscape, the sewer was gone. Kurama hated that most. He had hated the sewer when it existed. Hated the damp walls, the shallow water, the bars, the endless reminder that humans had sealed him in a cage and decorated it like a drainage system. He had spent years snarling in that place, claws against iron, malice filling the tunnels. Then Saturn arrived, and the sewer disappeared, not destroyed violently, replaced, that made it worse. Now the mindscape was a vast dark plain beneath a sky of motionless stars. No moon, no sun. No horizon that behaved properly. The ground was smooth and black, reflecting faint light from constellations Kurama did not recognize. His cage remained, but it no longer looked like iron bars in water. It looked like a circular boundary of red ceiling script floating in the air, elegant and precise, with Kurama at its center like a fire locked inside a diagram. Saturn sat outside the boundary on a stone chair that had not been there before, and had no reason to exist. He was reading. Always reading scrolls, memories, chakra patterns, fragments of the vessel's nervous system. The god treated the inside of Naruto's soul like an archive he had inherited. Kurama watched him with narrowed eyes. You redecorated. Saturn did not look up. Correct. I liked the sewer. No, you did not. Kurama's tails lashed. I liked hating it. Saturn turned a page. That is more accurate. The 9 tails growled for a while. Only the false stars moved. Then Kurama spoke again. The boy dreamed last night. Saturn continued reading. The vessel's native consciousness produces memory cycles during low activity periods. He dreamed of ramen. Yes. And Uruka. Yes. And the Uchiha brat. Yes. Kurama's eyes narrowed. You watching those too? I observe all internal activity. Of course you do. The fox lowered his head onto his paws, but the motion carried no relaxation. You know what I think? No, Saturn said. But you will say it anyway. Kurama bared his teeth. I think you're afraid of him. Saturn finally looked up. The air in the mindscape became colder. Kurama smiled. There it was, not fear, not really, but attention. The first victory available. Saturn's voice remained even. Explain. Kurama's grin widened. You call him subordinate, native consciousness, vessel identity. All those clean little words, but you keep the notebook. You avoid the ramen stand. You don't erase his dreams. You don't enter the little village he built inside himself. Saturn's gaze did not move. Kurama pressed on. If he's irrelevant, why leave the door closed? The stars overhead flickered, only once, but Kurama saw it. Saturn stood. In the mindscape, his child form seemed taller without changing size. Preservation of native consciousness maintains vessel stability. Kurama laughed. There it is. Stability, function, efficiency. You always hide behind the same walls. Saturn approached the boundary of the seal. Kurama rose to meet him, enormous and burning. The difference between them was absurd, a child-shaped god and a mountain-sized fox demon. Yet the pressure between them bent the dark plains. Saturn looked up. You defend him. Kurama's eyes flashed. I live here. That is not an answer. It's the answer you get. Saturn studied him. Your hostility toward humans is extensive. Your defense of this child is contradictory. Kurama snarled. Humans chained me, used me, passed me between seals and names and wars like a weapon with fur. I hate them. His voice dropped. But the boy didn't do that. Saturn said nothing. Kurama's tails slowed. He was born into the cage same as me. The words settled heavily. In the dark plain, for the first time, Saturn did not respond immediately. Kurama watched him, searching for any fracture, any sign that the ancient thing understood the accusation. Finally, Saturn said, shared confinement does not create equality. No, Kurama growled, but it creates relevance. The two ancient beings stared at each other across the seal. Then something moved far away, not in the plain, beyond it, a small shape at the edge of the mindscape, orange, blurry, a child standing at the entrance of a tiny imagined street. Kurama saw him. Saturn saw him. Naruto did not come closer. He simply stood there, silent, watching. For 1 second, the entire mindscape held its breath. Then the boy vanished. Saturn turned away first. Kurama's voice followed him. Subordinate doesn't mean gone. Saturn sat back in his chair. No, he said quietly. It does not. Kurama did not smile, but he remembered the answer. The world beyond Konoha noticed slowly. Then all at once, information traveled through shinobi networks like water through cracked stone. A merchant caravan carried a rumor to Tanzaku town. A missing nin informant sold a distorted version to a broker near the land of rivers. A cloud scout intercepted a coded message and delivered it to Kumagakure 2 days later. A sand operative reported irregular silence along Fire Country channels and requested permission to investigate. Most reports were dismissed at first. A child controlling the aftermath of the Uchiha massacre. Ridiculous. The Nine Tails Jinchuriki developing an unknown bloodline possible but unlikely. The third Hokage deferring to an academy student absurd. 17 Uchiha survivors hidden from public record. That one made people pay attention. In Iwagakure, the third Tsuchikage read the report twice, then ordered every reference to the Sage of 6 paths in their archives copied and locked separately. In Kumagakure, the fourth Reikage crushed the edge of his desk with one hand and demanded names, locations, confirmation, and contingency plans in that order. In Kirigakure, where bloodlines had already become nightmares, certain elders whispered that Konoha was finally learning what happened when clans retreated like tools. In Otagakure, a pale man with golden eyes smiled over a letter. Orochimaru had known Konoha could produce monsters. He had helped make some of them, but this was new. He sat in his laboratory, surrounded by scrolls, sealed samples, and instruments better left unnamed, and read the intercepted fragments with the attention of a starving scholar. Naruto Uzumaki Jinchuriki. Behavioral replacement after Uchiha massacre. Unknown pressure field, possible chakra network alteration, surviving Uchiha preserved, sage references requested. Orochimaru's smile widened. Transcendence had many masks. He had pursued immortality through body transfer, forbidden techniques, bloodline acquisition, and surgical theft from the limits of mortality. He had thought himself bold for discarding the moral language that held lesser researchers back, but this report suggested something beyond theft. Something had arrived, not evolved, not been trained, arrived. How unbearably fascinating. He took out a clean sheet of paper and began writing. His handwriting was elegant, almost beautiful. To the one currently wearing Naruto Uzumaki, he paused. No, too aggressive. He dipped the brush again. I have spent 40 years studying the nature of transcendence. You appear to have achieved what others only imitate. I would very much like to discuss methodology. I suspect our interests may align. He smiled, then signed it simply. Oh. The letter left Otagakure before midnight, carried by a snake smaller than a finger and more loyal than most men. Jiraiya received the report in a border town 3 days from Fire Country. He read it in a rented room above a gambling hall while rain struck the roof and laughter rose from the floor below. At first, he thought the code had been corrupted. Then he read it again, then a third time. By the end, the laughter downstairs sounded very far away. Naruto. The name hit him harder than the rest, not because he knew the boy well. That was the shame of it. He did not. He knew of Naruto. Of course he did. Minato's son, Kushina's son, the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. A child Jiraiya had avoided for reasons he had dressed up as necessity for 8 years. Too dangerous, too politically sensitive, too many enemies, too much guilt. He had told himself the boy was safer under Hiruzen's watch. Now he read the words native consciousness subordinate in a report written by a terrified Anbu, and felt something cold settle behind his ribs. What did we leave you with, kid? He whispered. The rain continued. Jiraiya stood. He packed badly, which meant quickly. Scrolls shoved into bags. Cloak thrown over one shoulder. Half-finished sake abandoned on the table. A barmaid called after him from the stairs. Leaving already. Jiraiya forced his usual grin and failed. Emergency family matter. He was out the window before she could ask more. On the road to Konoha, he ran faster than he had in years. In Konoha, Saturn sensed him before anyone announced his approach, not by chakra signature alone, by emotional trajectory. Jiraiya's chakra was large, rough-edged, powerful, and unusually open. Unlike most elite shinobi who learn to fold themselves inward, Jiraiya moved through the world like a storm pretending to be a man. Grief, guilt, affection, fear, curiosity all present, all loud, all poorly concealed beneath humor and bravado, a useful anomaly. Saturn stood on the roof of Naruto's apartment building and looked west. The red moon had not risen yet. The village below moved with its new quiet. Behind him, one of Danzo's distant observers shifted on a rooftop 4 buildings away, believing himself unseen. Saturn ignored him. His attention was on the horizon. Kurama stirred inside. You feel him? Yes, Jiraiya, one of the Sannin, Minato's teacher. Yes, Kurama's eyes narrowed in the mindscape, and Naruto's godfather, technically. Saturn paused. That word had appeared in the vessel's memory only faintly. Not experienced, not embodied, a relationship defined by absence. Godfather, Saturn repeated. Kurama's mouth twisted. Humans have names for duties they fail. Saturn considered that. Below, a child laughed somewhere in the civilian district, then went quiet when an adult hushed them. Saturn's gaze remained west. Will he attempt extraction? Kurama gave a low rumble. He'll attempt something worse. What? He'll care. Saturn did not respond. The wind moved over the rooftop. For a moment, the small body stood motionless against the evening sky, blonde hair stirred by the breeze, ocean-dark eyes fixed on a road where a man carrying too much guilt was running home. Then Saturn turned away. Observation continues. Inside the seal, Kurama watched him with ancient eyes. You can catalog everything, the fox muttered. Doesn't mean you understand it. Saturn descended from the roof without a sound. That night, the red moon rose over Konoha again. In the Uchiha district, Riina woke from a dream of cold hands and whispered thank you, before remembering she did not know who she was thanking. In the hospital, Sasuke trained until a medic found him collapsed beside a cracked wall. In the Hokage Tower, Hiruzen read Jiraiya's return notice and allowed himself one breath of relief he did not trust. In an underground chamber, Danzo adjusted his plans. In a hidden laboratory far away, Orochimaru waited for a reply. And in Naruto's apartment, the notebook opened by itself. Not by wind, not by chakra, by one small hand inside one very deep prison pressing against the world through the only thing still fully his. The page showed a simple drawing, a boy, a fox, and a tall man with long white hair. Naruto Saturn looked at it for a long time. Then carefully, he closed the book. Chapter 5. The hunt begins. Shukaku's reckoning. A weapon does not become free because the hand holding it changes. It becomes free when someone finally asks what it was before it was a weapon. Saturn left Konoha before sunrise. He did not ask permission. He did not request travel papers. He did not sign out through the mission desk, notify the gate guards, or receive authorization from the Hokage's office. He simply walked out. That, more than anything, revealed the new reality of the village, because the guards saw him. 2 Chunin stood at the main gate when the small blonde figure approached through the morning mist. Both had orders, very clear orders. Any unusual movement by Naruto Uzumaki was to be reported immediately. Under no circumstances was he to be engaged without authorization from the Hokage. Those orders had been written by men trying to sound calm. The guards understood what they really meant. Do not stop him. So when Naruto walked toward the gate, wearing his usual orange jacket, carrying no bag, no canteen, no weapon, the guards stepped aside. Not dramatically, not out of worship. Out of survival, Naruto paused beneath the wooden archway and looked at them. One guard's face went pale, the other swallowed hard. Leaving the village, the braver one asked. His voice cracked on the last word. Naruto regarded him with mild interest. Yes. Should we inform the Hokage? You already intend to. The guard said nothing. Naruto turned his gaze toward the road stretching west. Wind country lay far beyond the forests, beyond rivers, beyond border outposts, beyond the places where green slowly surrendered to dry earth and stone. The one tail was there, Shukaku, old. Bitter, loud, badly managed, Saturn had felt him for weeks. At first, the tailed beasts had been distant signatures, scattered points of ancient chakra across the continent, each one carrying a different emotional frequency. Rage, grief, pride, isolation, exhaustion, suspicion, Kurama was within. Shukaku was closest. The one tail burned against Saturn's awareness like a cracked bell ringing in sand. Unstable seal, young host, high emotional volatility, political vulnerability, ideal first retrieval. Naruto stepped beyond the village gate. The guards did not breathe until he was gone. 3 minutes later, an Anbu report reached the Hokage Tower. 6 minutes later, Hiruzen Sarutobi read it. 7 minutes later, he sent for Jiraiya. Jiraiya was already gone. He caught up with Saturn near the Western Forest Road by mid-morning, not because Saturn was moving slowly, because Jiraiya was moving desperately. The toad sage dropped from the trees ahead of Naruto in a swirl of white hair and travel dust, landing in the middle of the road with enough force to crack the dirt beneath his sandals. A lesser shinobi would have used the entrance to intimidate. Jiraiya used it because he was tired and angry and had run through half the night. Naruto stopped. The road between them was empty. Birds stopped singing. Jiraiya straightened slowly. For the first time, he saw the boy clearly, 8 years old, blonde, whisker marks. Minato's face in smaller, softer lines. Kushina's stubbornness somewhere in the shape of the mouth. For one terrible second, Jiraiya did not see Saturn. He saw the child he should have visited, the child he had avoided because guilt was easier to carry from a distance. Then Naruto looked up at him with ocean-dark eyes, and the illusion died. Jiraiya had faced monsters, real ones. He had fought Hanzo of the Salamander and lived. He had battled enemy ninja whose names were now carved into memorial stones. He had trained alongside Orochimaru long enough to know what it felt like when humanity slipped out of a person, and something colder took its place. But this was different. Orochimaru felt like hunger sharpened into a man. The 9 tails felt like rage given fur and fire. The thing inside Naruto felt like law, not village law, not moral law, natural law, gravity, tide. The certainty that mountains did not ask permission to crush what stood beneath them. Jiraiya forced himself to grin. It was a poor grin, he knew it. So, he said, hands on his hips. Going for a walk, kid, Saturn watched him. You are Jiraiya. The name sounded strange in Naruto's voice. No nickname, no childish wonder, no recognition from the boy who should have grown up hearing stories about the legendary toad sage, just identification. Jiraiya's grin faded. Yeah. And you're Naruto Uzumaki? No, the answer struck harder than expected. Jiraiya's jaw tightened. No, the vessel is Naruto Uzumaki. Jiraiya stepped forward. The pressure arrived immediately, not full force, just enough to make his bones understand the argument they had entered. He kept walking anyway, 1 step, 2, his shoulders tensed. His chakra rose, broad and rough, pushing back not like a blade but like a man bracing against a storm. By the 3rd step, sweat gathered at his temple. By the 4th, his knees wanted to bend. He stopped at the 5th. 5 steps from Saturn. That was as far as he could go without making the confrontation physical. Saturn tilted his head. Impressive. Jiraiya laughed once, no humor in it. That all I get. Impressive. For a human, there it is. Jiraiya lowered himself into a crouch, bringing his eyes closer to Naruto's height. The movement cost him. The pressure made it feel like kneeling before a throne. He did it anyway, not in submission, in defiance of scale. You're not the first powerful thing I've talked to, Jiraiya said. No. You're also not the first thing to think power makes people simple. Saturn's gaze sharpened faintly. Humans are rarely simple. They are inefficient, contradictory, emotionally hazardous, and frequently self-destructive. Sounds like you've met the good ones. Saturn studied him. The joke landed nowhere obvious, but Jiraiya had the strangest feeling that it had been filed away. You are attempting rapport through irreverence, Saturn said. I'm attempting not to punch an 8-year-old in the face. That would fail. Yeah, Jiraiya said softly. I know. For a moment, the road was silent. Then Jiraiya's voice changed, lost the performance, lost the old wandering fool act. Naruto, he said. The name was quiet, direct. Saturn did not react. Jiraiya leaned forward despite the pressure. If you can hear me in there, kid, my name's Jiraiya. I knew your dad. I should have known you sooner. That's on me. The air grew colder. Saturn's expression did not change, but the space around him tightened. Jiraiya felt it and kept speaking. You don't know me. Not really, but I know enough to know you're stubborn, so wherever you are, hold on. Something moved behind Saturn's eyes. Tiny, almost nothing. But Jiraiya saw it. He had spent his life watching masks. He knew a crack when he saw one. Then it vanished. Saturn spoke. You are looking for the boy. Jiraiya's throat tightened. I'm looking at him. No. You are looking at the memory of a responsibility you failed to fulfill. Jiraiya flinched. It was not visible to most. Saturn saw it. Of course he did. Guilt, Saturn continued, is directing your attachment response. Jiraiya's hands curled. Maybe doesn't make the attachment fake. It makes it late. That one landed clean. Jiraiya looked down at the road for a moment. He had no joke, no mask, no easy answer. Then he looked back up. Yeah, he said. It does. Saturn watched him in silence. Jiraiya stood slowly. His knees hurt. He ignored it. Where are you going? Wind Country. Why? To retrieve Shukaku. Jiraiya's stomach dropped. The one-tailed Gaara of the sand, the Kazekage son, an unstable Jinchuriki in a politically paranoid village. That's not a walk, Jiraiya said. No, you planning to start a war? No, that's comforting. War is inefficient. Tell that to everyone who starts one. Saturn began walking past him. Jiraiya turned, keeping pace at a careful distance. The pressure lessened when he stopped trying to block the road. You can't just take a tailed beast from another village. I can, Jiraiya sighed sharply. That's not what I mean, I know. Then answer the meaning. Saturn continued down the road. Human governments have classified tailed beasts as strategic weapons. This classification is false and has produced centuries of suffering, instability, and repeated military escalation. I am correcting the classification. Jiraiya stared at him. You're 8. The vessel is 8. You know, somehow that makes it worse. Saturn did not respond. Jiraiya followed, not close enough to provoke, not far enough to abandon. From the trees, hidden Anbu watched both of them leave Fire Country. By noon, Hiruzen knew. By nightfall, Danzo knew. By morning, soon as border scouts knew something was coming. The land changed gradually. Green softened into gold, trees thinned, rivers narrowed. The road became harder, dustier, less forgiving. Fire Country's forests gave way to rocky slopes and dry wind. By the second day, the horizon widened. By the third, the air tasted of sand. Saturn did not appear tired. He did not stop to sleep. He did not complain of heat, thirst, hunger, or boredom. Jiraiya complained about all four, loudly, on purpose. At first, Saturn ignored him. By the 4th hour of Jiraiya loudly discussing the tragedy of traveling without proper food, Saturn said, Your vocalizations are not required for survival. Jiraiya brightened. Oh, so you do get annoyed. No, that sounded annoyed. It was correction. That's worse. Saturn looked at him. Jiraiya grinned. The grin was more real this time. He had discovered something important. Saturn could be engaged, not emotionally, maybe, not normally, but he responded to persistence, to contradiction, to patterns that did not fit his existing categories. So Jiraiya became as difficult to categorize as possible. He told stories, some true, some exaggerated, some absolutely false. He spoke of Minato as a student, not as a legend. How the future 4th Hokage had once spent 3 hours designing a seal to keep frogs from stealing his lunch, only for Gamabunta to eat the entire lunchbox out of spite. He spoke of Kushina's temper, her laugh, her habit of calling Jiraiya an irresponsible old pervert with enough affection that the insult became tradition. Saturn rarely responded, but he listened. That mattered. Once, at sunset, Jiraiya mentioned ramen. Naruto's step changed, only slightly. A half-second disturbance in rhythm. Jiraiya pretended not to notice. Saturn noticed him pretending, neither spoke of it. Inside the mindscape, Kurama watched with narrowed eyes. You are allowing this. Saturn walked beneath the desert stars, body moving without fatigue. Allowing what? The loud one. He provides useful information. Kurama snorted. He provides headaches. He has extensive knowledge of Minato Namikaze, Kushina Uzumaki, sealing theory, Sannin-level combat behavior, and emotional attachment structures relevant to the vessel. You mean Naruto, the vessel. Kurama's eyes flashed. The boy. Saturn said nothing. Kurama lowered his head. You heard him when he said, hold on. Yes, and nothing. You're lying. I do not lie without purpose. You're lying to yourself, that's different. Saturn's gaze remained on the road. Outside, Jiraiya was humming badly, very badly. Saturn eventually said, "His singing is inefficient." Kurama laughed so loudly the seal trembled. Suna saw them before they reached the village. Of course it did. Wind Country did not protect itself with trees or mist. It protected itself with distance and exposure. Nothing approached the hidden sand without being seen by someone, something, or some seal buried under dunes older than the village. The first scouts saw a small blonde child and a tall white-haired man walking through the desert without a caravan. He almost dismissed them as impossible. Then the sand around his hiding place stopped moving, not because of wind, because the child looked in his direction. The scout's throat dried. He retreated immediately. By the time Saturn and Jiraiya reached the outer canyon approach, Suna was awake. Archers stood hidden among stone ridges. Sensor Nin pressed hands to sand-worn walls. Puppet masters waited with chakra strings already attached. Orders moved quickly through the village. Do not engage unless attacked. Confirm identity. Protect the Kazekage children, especially Gaara. That last order came too late. Saturn had not entered through the main canyon. He had no need. He stopped half a kilometer from Suna's outer boundary and turned south. Jiraiya followed, frowning. The village is that way. Yes. Then why are we going this way? Shukaku is outside the village. Jiraiya's face tightened. Gaara, he had read the reports. The Kazekage's youngest son, one-tailed Jinchuriki, unstable, feared by his own people, weaponized from birth. Another child turned into a container by adults who called it necessity. Jiraiya looked at Naruto's small back. History had a cruel sense of humor. They found Gaara beneath a crescent of stone where the desert dipped into a dry basin. He was alone. Of course he was alone. Gaara sat in the sand with his knees drawn up, arms resting over them, dark ringed eyes fixed on a scorpion trapped in a shallow circle of sand. Every time the creature tried to climb out, the sand shifted and pushed it back, not killing it, not freeing it, keeping it. Jiraiya stopped at the ridge. Saturn walked down into the basin. Gaara looked up immediately. The sand around him rose like a living wall, his eyes narrowed. Who are you? Saturn stopped 10 meters away. Naruto Uzumaki. Jiraiya looked sharply at him. It was the first time Saturn had used the name without correction. Gaara stood. The sand moved around him in thick streams, circling his body, defensive and eager. No, Gaara said. Saturn tilted his head. Gaara's voice was flat, but something wild lived beneath it. You're not like the others. No, you smell wrong, Jiraiya muttered from above. That's one way to put it. Gaara's eyes flicked toward him, then back to Saturn. The sand lunged, not fully. A test. A spear of compressed grains shot forward fast enough to pierce stone. It reached Saturn's gravity field and stopped. No impact, no deflection. It simply halted in the air, trembling, as if each grain had individually realized that approaching further was forbidden. Gaara stared. His expression did not change much, but his pupils tightened. The sand tried again, more this time. A wave rose from the basin floor, curving like a claw. It stopped 2 meters from Saturn, then fell straight down. Gaara's breathing changed, not fear, recognition without understanding. Saturn watched him. You carry Shukaku. The name struck Gaara like a slap. His face twisted. Don't say that. He has been in your family's custody for 2 generations. Before that, he moved through 11 vessels in approximately 400 years. Current containment quality is poor. Host integration is unstable. Psychological damage extensive. The sand around Gaara shook. Shut up. You have not slept properly in years. Shut up. Your village fears you. Your father uses you. Your siblings avoid triggering you. The entity inside you worsens your isolation because his own confinement has degraded his behavior. Gaara's eyes widened. His sand surged upward, higher than before. Shut up! The shout cracked across the basin. Jiraiya tensed. Saturn did not move. The sand crashed toward him from every side. For a moment, the desert became a closing fist. Then the fist stopped all of it. A dome of sand hung in the air around Saturn, frozen inches from his skin. Saturn looked at Gaara through the suspended grains. I am going to take him from you. Gaara froze. The sand collapsed all at once, not attacking, falling. The boy stared. What? I will remove Shukaku. Gaara's face went blank. Then something like fury tried to return and failed because hope had gotten there first. No. Yes, you're lying. No, you can't. I can. Gaara's hands shook. The gourd on his back trembled. For years, every voice in his life had told him what Shukaku meant. Weapon, monster. Proof of his purpose. Reason for his isolation. Reason for his mother's death, according to the lie he had been fed. Reason no one could love him. Now a strange child stood in the desert and spoke of removing the beast like correcting an administrative error. Gaara's voice dropped to a whisper. If you take him, he could not finish. If Shukaku was gone, what remained? A person, a mistake, an empty weapon, nothing. Saturn answered the unfinished question. You will remain. Gaara looked at him. Why? Because you are not Shukaku. The words were simple, too simple. They entered Gaara like water entering cracked earth. For a moment, he looked younger than he ever allowed himself to look. Jiraiya's throat tightened. Saturn stepped closer. Gaara's sand did not stop him. That terrified Gaara more than if it had failed. It simply did not move. Saturn raised one hand, not toward Gaara's face, toward the seal. Gaara's body locked. Shukaku woke. The one tail did not wake gently. Inside Gaara, the mindscape was a storm. Sand, laughter, cracked sky, broken sleep. Rage piled on rage until it no longer knew its first cause. Shukaku surged upward with a scream that shook Gaara's body from the inside. Who touches my cage? The desert answered. Wind exploded outward. Jiraiya raised one arm against the blast. Cross Suna. Sensor Nin screamed warnings. Gaara arched backward, sand spiraling around him, the seal on his body burning with old pain. Saturn's spider limbs unfolded fully. For the first time since the Uchiha massacre, there was no hiding them. They extended from behind Naruto's small body in long, impossible arcs, dark and elegant, each joint bending according to anatomy that did not belong to this world. They did not cast proper shadows. They moved through the air as if the air was optional. Jiraiya felt his stomach twist. Seeing reports was one thing, seeing the limbs touch reality was another. Saturn placed one hand near Gaara's chest. The spider appendages moved around him, not piercing flesh, not cutting, but entering the spaces between chakra pathways. Celestial anatomy did not break the seal. It read it, layer by layer, human formula, Suna design, improvised restraints, generational repair, fear disguised as engineering. Shukaku slammed against the inner prison. Get out, Saturn's eyes darkened. No, the world changed. For one instant, Jiraiya saw something behind Naruto, not physically, conceptually, a vast shadow, a throne, a spider shape too large for the desert. A red moon hanging over a sea that had never existed in the shinobi world. Then it was gone, Gaara screamed, not in pain, in release. That was worse. The seal opened like a lock recognizing its true owner. Sand erupted into the sky. A massive shape formed above the basin, rising from desert and chakra. Tanuki body, violet markings, jagged mouth stretched in fury. Shukaku emerged, not fully free, not fully bound. Manifested enough to cast a shadow over the sand. He roared, and the canyon walls shook. Suna's distant alarms began. Jiraiya prepared a summoning. Then Shukaku looked down at Saturn. The roar died in his throat. The one tail went still. For one impossible second, the ancient Biju looked afraid, not of Naruto, not of Kurama's chakra, of recognition. Saturn looked up at him. Shukaku. The Biju's eyes narrowed. You, the word came out low. No madness now, no laughter, just old memory. Jiraiya stared. You know him, he whispered. Shukaku's gaze did not leave Saturn. I know what he feels like. Saturn's spider limbs remained extended around Gaara, maintaining the open seal without damage. You have been poorly housed, Saturn said. Shukaku's mouth twisted. I have been imprisoned. Yes, by humans. Yes. And now another thing wearing human skin comes to collect me. Saturn's expression remained calm. Not collect, reclassify, Shukaku laughed. It was harsh, dry, like wind grinding bones into sand, but it carried more sanity than any report had ever credited him with. Big word. Same cage. No, the word was quiet. Shukaku stopped laughing. Saturn continued. You were divided from a greater source. Distributed into a political environment incapable of understanding your purpose. Weaponized, sealed, transferred, blamed for the instability produced by your own mistreatment. Your current existence is inefficient. Shukaku's eyes flashed. I don't need pity from a spider. This is not pity. Then what is it? Correction. The desert stilled. Gaara collapsed to his knees, breathing hard but alive, more alive than he had felt in years. The constant pressure in his skull was gone. The scratching voice, the sleepless rage, the sand-whispered hatred, all of it had moved outside him. For the first time since early childhood, Gaara was alone in his own body. It terrified him. It felt like mercy. Shukaku looked down at him. Something complicated moved across the Biju's face, guilt, perhaps, or annoyance at guilt. You're not dead, brat. Gaara looked up slowly. His eyes filled with something he did not understand. No, Shukaku huffed. Don't look at me like that. Saturn interrupted. Your choices are as follows. Shukaku's gaze snapped back. Saturn raised one finger. 1. Return to the host. This maintains current instability and wastes both of you. Second finger. 2. Flee. You will be hunted by every village, including the one now mobilizing behind me. Third finger. 3. Enter the celestial tide as an external node. You will not be sealed in the vessel. You will retain consciousness and limited autonomy while participating in reconstruction of the original Biju architecture. Shukaku stared. Jiraiya stared harder. Gaara barely understood the words, but something inside him knew his life was being decided. Shukaku's eyes narrowed. And the fox. Inside Naruto, Kurama growled. Saturn answered aloud, internal. Shukaku's grin returned slightly. Ha, bet he hates that. Yes, for some reason that seemed to please Shukaku. The one tail lowered his massive head closer to Saturn. And what do you get? Completion. Of what? The machine. The air changed. Even Jiraiya felt it. The machine. The phrase carried too much weight, too much history. As if the sage of 6 paths had not merely created peace, not merely split the 10 tails, but left behind a structure no one living understood. Shukaku understood enough to stop smiling. You're not the sage. No, you're not of this world. No. Then why should any of us trust you with what he made? Saturn looked up at the massive beast, because humans have already demonstrated what they do with it. Silence. That answer did not make him good. It made him difficult to argue with. Shukaku looked toward Suna, the village that had sealed him, used him, feared him, fed him children, and called them hosts. Then he looked at Gaara. The boy stared back, small and shaking in the sand. For centuries, Shukaku had hated his vessels. It was easier that way. Hate the cage, hate the bars, hate the hands that fed you, hate the child because the child was where the prison began. But looking at Gaara now, separated for the first time, Shukaku saw something he had refused to see. The brat had been a cage. Yes. But he had also been inside one. Shukaku looked away first. Fine, he said. Jiraiya's eyes widened. Gaara's breath stopped. Saturn lowered his hand. The spider limbs shifted, forming a circular pattern in the air. Kurama's chakra stirred inside Naruto, unwilling but responsive. The red-gold violence of the 9 tails filtered through Saturn's authority and emerged as something different, darker, smoother, vast as a tide under moonlight, celestial tide. It did not look like chakra, it looked like night learning to move, a ring formed behind Saturn, not a seal, a network. Shukaku's massive form broke apart into sand and light. He did not enter Naruto's body. Instead, his chakra condensed into a rotating mark within the outer ring, a satellite consciousness tethered but not consumed. For a moment, the desert held 2 ancient signatures, Kurama within, Shukaku without. Then the ring vanished, the pressure eased, Gaara fell forward onto his hands. Jiraiya rushed to him but stopped short when Gaara's sand rose weakly between them, not attacking, habit. Gaara stared at the sand. It moved sluggishly now, still his but different, less alive, less angry. His voice trembled. He's gone. Saturn looked at him. Yes, Gaara pressed one hand to his chest. There was no laughter inside, no scratching, no threat of sleep turning into death. His face crumpled. He tried to stop it, could not. For the first time in years, Gaara of the sand began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silently, with one hand gripping his shirt as if afraid his own heart might leave too. Jiraiya looked away. Some things deserved privacy even in the middle of history. Saturn watched. His expression did not soften, but he did not interrupt. Suna arrived too late to stop anything. That did not stop them from trying to look like they could have. A squad of Jonin appeared along the ridge, followed by puppet masters and barrier specialists. Behind them stood Temari and Kankuro, both pale, both staring at their younger brother in a way that made clear they had never seen him cry before and did not know whether approaching would help or kill them. The Kazekage arrived last. Rasa's face was hidden behind authority, but his chakra betrayed him. Fear, anger, calculation. Saturn turned toward him. The desert seemed to lower itself. Rasa stopped at the top of the ridge. His guards stopped with him. Jiraiya rose slowly. "This can still be handled diplomatically," he called. No one believed him. Rasa's eyes moved from Gaara to Naruto. "You entered Wind Country without authorization." Saturn looked at him. "Yes, you interfered with a Suna military asset." Gaara flinched. Temari saw it. For the first time, anger overcame fear on her face. Saturn's eyes remained on Rasa. "Incorrect classification." Rasa's gaze hardened. "You removed the one tail." "Yes. That beast belongs to Suna." The pressure fell, not gradually, instantly. Every Suna shinobi on the ridge felt it. Knees bent, puppets dropped, chakra strings snapped. One barrier specialist collapsed fully into the sand, gasping. Rasa remained standing, barely. Gold dust rose around him, shaking under the strain. Saturn's voice carried across the basin. "Shukaku belongs to himself. Your village held him, poorly." Rasa's jaw tightened. "You threaten war." "No. I am preventing future misuse. You stole our deterrent. I removed your excuse." The words struck harder than any attack. Rasa's gold dust faltered. Gaara slowly looked up at his father. There was no Shukaku in his eyes now, no madness, no weapon, just a boy. Rasa looked at him and, for one dangerous second, seemed not to know what he was seeing. Saturn noticed. So did Temari. So did Jiraiya. The Kazekige's voice lowered. "What have you done to my son?" Saturn's answer was immediate. "Returned him." Gaara's breath caught. Rasa had no reply. Because behind him, Suna's shinobi were watching, and they had heard. The weapon was gone. The boy remained. That changed everything, not cleanly, not kindly, not immediately, but undeniably. Jiraiya stepped forward, placing himself between the ridge and Saturn as much as anyone could place themselves between people and gravity. "Kazekage," he said, voice loud and steady. "Gaara is alive. The one tail is removed without host death. That alone makes this situation bigger than village ownership." Rasa's eyes sharpened. "You speak for Konoha?" Jiraiya glanced at Saturn. "No," he said. "I'm pretty sure nobody speaks for Konoha right now." Saturn did not correct him. That was somehow worse. Rasa looked at Gaara again. "Gaara. Come here." Gaara did not move. The silence that followed was small, but it changed the shape of the desert. Before this moment, Gaara would have obeyed or attacked. Those were the choices his life had given him. Now he did neither. He simply stayed where he was. Temari took one step down the ridge. Kankuro grabbed her wrist. She pulled free, slowly, carefully. She descended toward her brother. The sand did not attack her. Gaara watched her approach with wide, exhausted eyes. Temari stopped 2 meters away. "Gaara." His lips moved. No sound came. Then, barely audible, he said, "I'm tired." Temari's face broke. She knelt in front of him, not touching, not yet, but close enough. Kankuro came down next, fear and guilt warring across his painted face. Above them, Rasa watched his children gather around the sun he had made into a weapon and discovered, too late, that weapons remembered being children. Saturn turned away. Jiraiya stared at him. "You're leaving. My objective is complete. You just broke the military balance of Wind Country." It was already broken. That's not comforting. It was not intended to be. Jiraiya rubbed a hand over his face. Behind them, Gaara whispered something to Temari, and she covered her mouth with one hand. Jiraiya did not hear the words. Saturn did. "I can sleep." For the first time since entering Wind Country, Saturn paused, not long. Then he continued walking. They camped outside Suna that night, or rather, Jiraiya camped. Saturn stood beneath the open sky and looked at the moon. It was red again, brighter now. Shukaku's consciousness moved in the outer network like a restless storm testing the edges of a new container. Not cage, not freedom. Something between. Kurama watched him from within. "So," the Nine Tails said, "you collected the loud one." Shukaku's voice entered the network like sand scraping stone. "I can hear you, Fox, I know. You sound trapped." Kurama's eyes narrowed. "You sound smug for someone wearing a leash." "Not a leash," Shukaku snapped. Kurama smiled. Keep telling yourself that. Their argument rolled through the celestial tide like thunder. Saturn allowed it. Conflict between nodes produced information. Jiraiya sat near a small fire, writing a report he already knew would terrify Hiruzen. He glanced up at Naruto's silhouette. The child stood still beneath the red moon, spider limbs hidden, face unreadable. Jiraiya's brush hovered over the paper. How was he supposed to explain this? Naruto removed Shukaku without killing Gaara. Impossible. Shukaku joined him willingly. Worse. Gaara is alive and possibly free for the first time, a miracle. The Kazekage may interpret this as theft, mercy, humiliation, or all three. Accurate. Jiraiya sighed and wrote all of it. Then he looked back at Naruto. You know, he said. For something that claims not to care, you did a pretty good thing today. Saturn did not turn. I corrected inefficiency. You freed a kid. I removed a destabilizing entity from a damaged host. Same thing, worse wording. Saturn looked at him then. Jiraiya held his gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jiraiya said, quieter, Naruto would have liked that. The air chilled, not dangerously, but enough. Saturn turned back to the moon. Inside, far beneath God, Fox, and Tide, something small stirred. A boy's dream shifted. For the first time in weeks, Naruto dreamed not of being watched, feared, or buried. He dreamed of a red-haired boy sleeping peacefully under a desert sky. And in the dream, Naruto smiled. Only for a second, only inside, but Kurama saw it. Saturn did too, neither spoke. Above them, the moon burned red over Wind Country. Now there were two blazing signatures in Saturn's map, Kurama within, Shukaku without. 7 remained, far away, across mountains, forests, oceans, and hidden villages. The other tailed beasts felt the change. Some raged, some trembled. Some listened, and in the deep spaces between chakra and authority, the first line of a new circuit had been drawn. The hunt had begun. Chapter 6. The Red Moon Doctrine, a throne is not always built. Sometimes the world simply realizes it has already been standing beneath one. The 5-Cage Summit was not called because of war. That was what made it terrifying. War had rules, not moral rules, not kind ones, but familiar ones. Armies moved, borders tightened. Messengers ran until their legs failed, supply routes were guarded. Assassination teams vanished into enemy territory. Villages lied, threatened, denied, and prepared. The shinobi world understood war. It did not understand what to do when a child walked into Wind Country, removed the one tail from Suna's Jinchuriki without killing him, left the host alive, left the beast missing, and continued existing as if he had merely corrected a clerical error. That was why the summit was called. Not because one village attacked another, because every village realized at the same time that the old rules might no longer matter. The meeting took place in neutral territory, in an old stone fortress built into the side of a mountain between Earth Country and Iron Country. Samurai guarded the outer walls. Sensor barriers layered the halls. No village trusted any other village enough to host. No one trusted Konoha at all. Hiruzen Sarutobi attended in full Hokage robes. He looked older than he had a month ago. Beside him stood Jiraiya, arms folded, face unusually grim. That alone made the other cage uneasy. The Toad Sage was famous for arrogance, laughter, drinking, flirting, and surviving situations that killed better-behaved men. Seeing him silent was more alarming than seeing him wounded. The fourth Reikage arrived like a storm wearing a man's body. His anger filled the room before his voice did. The Tsuchikage floated above his chair, small, ancient, and sharp-eyed. The Mizukage's representative watched from behind a veil of political caution, mist still too unstable to expose all its internal weakness. Rasa, the Kazekage, came last. That was noticed, so was Gaara's absence. The Reikage slammed one hand onto the table before anyone formally began. Konoha will explain why its Jinchuriki violated Wind Country territory and stole a tailed beast. Hiruzen did not react to the word stole. That restraint cost him. Before this becomes an accusation chamber, he said, we should establish the facts. The Reikage's eyes flashed. The fact is that the one tail is gone. Rasa's face remained controlled. My son is alive. The room shifted. That fact made everything more complicated. If Gaara had died, the summit would have been simple. Tragic, dangerous, but simple. Konoha's Jinchuriki would have murdered another village's weapon. Retaliation would have followed, but Gaara lived, not only lived. According to reports, he had slept through an entire night for the first time in years. The Tsuchikage looked at Rasa. Is the host stable? Rasa's jaw tightened. He is no longer a host. And the one tail, gone, dead, no, sealed. Rasa's eyes moved to Hiruzen. No, the Reikage growled. Then where is it? Jiraiya answered before Hiruzen could, with Naruto. Every eye turned toward him. Jiraiya unfolded his arms, not inside him, not like the 9 tails. Shukaku is connected to him somehow, like an external node. The Mizukage representative spoke softly. External node. Don't ask me to explain the mechanics unless you want me to start lying. The Tsuchikage's gaze sharpened. What did you see? Jiraiya's usual mask was gone. I saw Naruto open Gaara's seal without tearing it apart. I saw Shukaku manifest. I saw the one tail recognize something in him. Then I saw Shukaku agree to join whatever Naruto is building. The Reikage stared. Tailed beasts do not agree. Jiraiya looked at him. That's what we thought. Silence. That was the problem. For generations, villages had spoken of tailed beasts as disasters, weapons, military assets, living storms to be sealed and aimed. No one built policy around asking them questions. The Tsuchikage lowered slightly, expression unreadable. And what is Naruto building? Hiruzen answered quietly. He called it a machine. The word landed badly. The Mizukage's representative stiffened. Rasa's fingers tightened on the table. The Reikage's face darkened. The Tsuchikage looked suddenly older. A machine, he repeated. Hiruzen nodded. He believes the tailed beasts are fragments of a greater system created by the Sage of 6 Paths. The Reikage scoffed. Religious nonsense. The Tsuchikage did not. He stared at the center of the table as if seeing something very far away. I have lived long enough, he said slowly, to know that the Sage's legends are rarely only legends. The Reikage turned on him. You believe this? I believe the world is built on things younger men call impossible because they have not survived long enough to see them wake up. The room went still. The Tsuchikage looked at Hiruzen. This presence inside your Jinchuriki, is it the 9 tails? No. Is it a bloodline? No. Is it a forbidden technique? I do not believe so. Then what is it? Hiruzen's answer was quiet, something wearing Naruto. The words changed the temperature of the room. Even the Reikage did not immediately speak. Rasa looked down, perhaps thinking of Gaara, perhaps thinking of the moment his son had looked at him without Shukaku behind his eyes and become harder to understand, not easier. Jiraiya's jaw tightened. He's still in there. Hiruzen looked at him. Jiraiya did not look away. Naruto, he said. The kid, he's still there. The Mizukage's representative asked, can he control it? No, can he resist it? Jiraiya hesitated. That hesitation was answer enough. Then he said, not yet. The Reikage barked a humorless laugh. Not yet. You want the 5 nations to wait while a possessed child collects Biju one by one. No, Jiraiya said. I want the 5 nations to not get themselves erased by pretending this is a normal Jinchuriki incident. The Reikage stood. Lightning chakra cracked faintly around his shoulders. You think Cloud fears Konoha's demon brat? Jiraiya's eyes hardened. I think Cloud should be very careful about using the word brat for something that made Shukaku stop laughing. That silenced the room more effectively than a threat. The Tsuchikage closed his eyes. When he opened them, his voice was low. I know what the Sage architecture feels like from a distance. Earth Country has old places, deep places. There are stones that remember chakra before our villages existed. He looked at Hiruzen. What you described does not sound like the Sage. No. Hiruzen said. The Tsuchikage's mouth tightened. It sounds like something the Sage was afraid of. No one had a follow-up to that. Orochimaru's letter arrived in Konoha while the summit was still in session. Not at the Hokage Tower. Not through a messenger. Not by bird. It appeared on Naruto's desk, folded neatly beside the notebook, delivered by a small white snake that dissolved into ash after placing it there. Saturn returned from the Uchiha district and found it immediately. He did not look surprised. He read the letter once. Then a second time. The handwriting was elegant, the tone respectful, the intent underneath it obvious, curiosity, ambition, hunger disguised as scholarship. Orochimaru had written, I have spent 40 years studying the nature of transcendence. You appear to have achieved what others only imitate. I would very much like to discuss methodology. I suspect our interests may align. Saturn placed the letter on the desk. Inside the mindscape, Kurama growled. Snake, you know him. Everyone knows him. He smells like laboratories and bad decisions. Saturn considered the phrase. Orochimaru possesses useful knowledge. He also possesses jars of people. That is likely true, and you're still going to answer. Yes, Kurama's tails lashed. Of course you are. Saturn sat down and took out a blank sheet of paper. His response was brief. You are confusing transcendence with inheritance. I did not achieve anything. I arrived. Your interest is noted. Your alignment with my interests is presumptuous. He paused, then continued. If you wish to be useful, bring documentation on Hashirama Senju's cellular architecture. I have questions regarding the first Hokage's affinity for life force manipulation, Biju suppression, and organic chakra expansion. He signed nothing. He did not need to. The letter folded itself. A spider limb shimmered into view, touched the paper, and marked it with a small dark seal that looked like a circle caught in a web. Dangerous correspondence, Kurama said. Yes, that doesn't bother you. No, it should. Saturn looked toward the closed notebook. For a moment, the room was silent. Then he said, Orochimaru seeks to become more than human because he fears the limitations of being human. Such fear makes him predictable. Kurama's eyes narrowed. And you, Saturn did not answer immediately. Kurama smiled without humor. What do you fear? Saturn's gaze moved to the window. Outside, evening gathered over Konoha. The moon was not visible yet. Waste, Saturn said. Kurama snorted. Try again. Saturn stood. The correspondence vanished from the desk, carried away by no visible hand. I do not require your approval. No, Kurama said. But you keep listening. Saturn left the apartment. Behind him, the notebook remained closed, for now. When Hiruzen returned from the summit, he did not go first to the council chamber. He went to the training ground behind the old academy. Jiraiya was already there. The toad sage sat on a wooden post, staring at the grass as if it had personally betrayed him. Hiruzen walked slowly, leaning more heavily on his staff than usual. You followed him to Wind Country, the Hokage said. Jiraiya did not look up. Yeah, you saw everything. Enough. Hiruzen stopped beside him. For a while, neither man spoke. In the distance, academy students shouted through basic drills. Their voices were faint but alive. A normal sound in an abnormal time. Finally, Hiruzen said, the summit failed. Jiraiya laughed once. Was it supposed to succeed? No, but I had hoped it might fail more quietly. That earned the ghost of a smile. Then Jiraiya's face hardened again. They're scared. They should be. Raikage wants a military coalition. He will not get one, not yet. Tsuchikage knows something. Hiruzen nodded. He suspects Saturn's existence touches older history than the villages. That makes two of us. Hiruzen looked at him. What did you feel near Shukaku? Jiraiya took longer to answer than usual. I felt Naruto. Hiruzen's eyes sharpened. Explain. When Saturn was removing Shukaku, everything was cold, controlled, like surgery, but after Gaara cried, Jiraiya stopped. His jaw worked once. The kid reacted. Saturn, Naruto. The wind moved through the training posts. Jiraiya continued, voice quieter. I can't prove it, I can't put it in a report, but something in him was happy Gaara got free, not Saturn. Saturn called it correction, efficiency. Whatever cold word he wanted, but Naruto felt it. Hiruzen closed his eyes. Hope was dangerous. At his age, he knew that better than anyone. Still, he let himself breathe. Then we preserve that. Jiraiya looked at him. What? The world Naruto would recognize. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed. Hiruzen's voice was tired but steady. We cannot defeat Saturn. Not now, perhaps not ever. We cannot remove him. We cannot command him. We may not even be able to slow him. That's cheerful. But we can refuse to let Konoha become his temple. Jiraiya said nothing. Hiruzen turned toward the academy field, where children ran through drills under Uruka's sharp voice. There is a difference between surviving under power and worshipping it. Konoha must remember that difference. Jiraiya looked away. And if people start worshipping anyway, they will. The answer was immediate, painful, honest. Some already do, Hiruzen continued. The Uchiha survivors, a few civilians, even some shinobi. Power offers certainty. Certainty is seductive when the world has become frightening. Jiraiya's fists tightened. So what do? We keep teaching children that strength is not the same thing as authority. We keep missions running. We protect the survivors. We speak to Naruto, even when Saturn answers. We refuse to surrender the village soul simply because its body is afraid. Jiraiya laughed softly. You make it sound noble. It is desperate. Same thing half the time. Hiruzen looked at him then. I need you here. Jiraiya's expression changed. He had spent years avoiding being needed in one place for too long. Wandering was easier. Espionage was easier. Research, danger, distance, all easier than facing the people he had failed by absence. Naruto needs you here, Hiruzen said. That landed. Jiraiya looked toward the academy. He doesn't know me. No, I wasn't there. No, he might hate me if he comes back. Hiruzen's voice softened. Then be here long enough to deserve it. Jiraiya closed his eyes. For a moment, he saw Minato smiling too politely, Kushina yelling too loudly, and a small blond boy standing on a desert road with a god looking through his face. When he opened his eyes, the old fool was gone. Only the teacher remained. All right, Jiraiya said. Hiruzen nodded. Neither man smiled. There was nothing to celebrate, but something had been chosen. Saturn returned to the Uchiha district 3 days later with 2 more Biju signatures flickering in the outer edges of his awareness. Not fully integrated, not like Shukaku, but contacted. The 2 tails had not agreed exactly. Matatabi was too proud, too sharp, too aware of the difference between negotiation and surrender, but she had listened. That mattered. The 5 tails had resisted longer. Kokuo disliked the feel of Saturn's authority and disliked Kurama's presence even more. Still, the seed had been planted. Saturn did not rush. Time was not an enemy. Humans rushed because they decayed. Gods planned because decay belonged to other things. The Uchiha district had changed again. Children were not there. There were no children left among the 17 survivors. That absence shaped every wall. But the adults had begun rebuilding patterns. Meals were cooked in the communal hall. Training grounds were swept. Clan records were copied under Saturn's supervision. Grief had not faded, but it had become scheduled. Humans did that often. They placed pain into rituals so the body could continue. Riina met him at the central courtyard. She bowed. Hiruzen, standing nearby, stiffened. Saturn noticed. Unnecessary, he said. Riina straightened. I know. Then why perform it? She looked uncomfortable. Because I wanted to. That is not a sufficient reason. To humans, it often is. Hiruzen said quietly. Saturn glanced at him. The Hokage had come personally today, not to stop him, to witness. The old man had begun doing that more frequently, appearing wherever Saturn's influence deepened, not interfering unless necessary, not surrendering ground completely. Saturn found the behavior inefficient but consistent. Consistency had uses. Riina handed Saturn a scroll. These are the family lines you asked for. Survivors marked in red, deceased marked in black, unknown branches noted separately. Saturn accepted it. You completed this quickly. We wanted to help. Hiruzen's face tightened. Saturn looked at Riina. Why? She held his gaze for several seconds before answering. Because if we are all that remains, then we need to know what we are remaining for. A human answer. Pain disguised as purpose. Saturn looked down at the scroll. Your clan's prior purpose was unstable. Riina's mouth tightened. Yes, it produced rebellion conditions. Yes, it produced internal surveillance response. Yes, it produced massacre. Her eyes flashed. Yes, the courtyard went still. Hiruzen took 1 step forward. Riina did not look away from Saturn. But it also produced families, she said. Songs, names, recipes, training styles, bad jokes, funeral rites, stories about our grandparents, children who wanted to impress their older brothers, mothers who stayed awake waiting for mission reports. Her voice shook. You keep studying our eyes like they are the point of us. Saturn watched her. They are the component relevant to my work. They are not the point of us. The words struck the courtyard with a force no jutsu could have matched. Hiruzen stared at Riina with something like pride. Saturn was silent for longer than usual. Then he said, clarify. Riina laughed through sudden tears. I don't know how. Saturn's expression did not change, but the air around him shifted, not colder. Still inside the mindscape, Kurama raised his head. She got you there. Saturn ignored him. Riina wiped her face quickly, embarrassed by the display. I'm sorry. No, Saturn said. Everyone looked at him. The single word had not been soft, but it had been different. Saturn looked down at the scroll again. Your correction is noted. Hiruzen's breath caught. Rina bowed her head, not in worship this time, but because she could not trust her face. Saturn walked past her toward the archive hall. Hiruzen followed. The old Hokage said nothing, but he added the moment to the quiet list he kept in his heart, a list of cracks, small ones, maybe meaningless. Maybe everything. The announcement came 7 days later. No messenger delivered it. No poster was written. No council approved it. At sunset, Naruto Saturn walked into the center of Konoha and stood in the main square. People stopped moving. At first, only those nearby noticed. A fruit seller froze with an apple still in his hand. 2 academy students stopped arguing. A passing Jonin landed on a rooftop and immediately signaled others without knowing why. Then the pressure spread, not crushing, calling. The village felt him. Civilians opened windows. Shinobi stepped from alleys. Merchants left stalls. Mothers held children close but did not go inside. The Hokage tower emptied. Hiruzen arrived with Jiraiya at his side. Danzo watched from a shaded rooftop far away. The elders came because not coming would have admitted fear more clearly than arriving. Uruka stood near the academy students, one hand unconsciously extended as if he could shield them from gravity. Sasuke stood at the edge of the crowd. He had come alone. His face was thinner now, his eyes harder. The massacre had carved childhood out of him quickly. He stared at Naruto with hatred, confusion, and something he would rather die than name, measurement. Saturn noticed him, then looked away. The red moon rose early, too early. It climbed above the Hokage monument while the sky still held sunset orange, staining the stone faces with crimson light. No one spoke. Saturn stood in the square, small enough that he should have been swallowed by the crowd. Instead, the crowd felt arranged around him. When he spoke, his voice did not shout, it carried anyway. The current global order is built on a classification error. The first sentence confused many civilians. It terrified the shinobi. Saturn continued. The entities known as tailed beasts have been treated by human governments as weapons, deterrents, curses, inheritance assets, and village property. These classifications are inaccurate. Hiruzen closed his eyes briefly. So this was it, the public line, the doctrine. The tailed beasts are not weapons. They are biological infrastructure, fragments of a system designed by the Sage of Six Paths and subsequently mismanaged by human authority for centuries. Murmurs moved through the crowd. A few people looked toward the Hokage. He gave them no reassurance. Saturn's eyes moved slowly across the square. That mismanagement is ending. The murmurs died. The one tail has been removed from Suna custody. The host survived. The entity remains conscious. This will be the model going forward where possible. A civilian whispered. He took a biju. A shinobi beside him whispered back. Be quiet. Saturn continued. The 5 nations may continue as administrative units. Villages may continue mission structures, clan systems, territorial governance, and cultural practices. I have no quarrel with human constructs that do not obstruct correction. The word correction chilled the square. Jiraiya's jaw tightened. Danzo's eye narrowed. Sasuke's fists clenched. The tailed beasts will be gathered, not as weapons, not as slaves, not as village property. They will be returned to function within a greater architecture. Hiruzen stepped forward. Not much enough, Naruto. The name crossed the square. Saturn looked at him. For a moment, the entire village watched the Hokage speak to the child he had failed, the god he could not command, and the boy he hoped still heard. Hiruzen's voice was steady. And the hosts, the question mattered. Gaara had survived, but future hosts Yujiro, Yagura, Roshi, Han, others scattered across nations, each one a person beneath policy. Saturn answered. Host survival is preferred. Preferred is not enough. A ripple passed through the crowd. The Hokage had challenged him, publicly. Saturn's gaze deepened. The pressure increased. Several civilians dropped to their knees. A few shinobi followed despite themselves. Hiruzen remained standing. Jiraiya stepped beside him, also standing. Uruka, pale and shaking, forced himself to remain upright near the students. Sasuke's knees bent. He locked them, teeth gritted, hatred keeping him vertical. Saturn observed all of this, then the pressure eased. Host survival will be prioritized unless obstruction creates unacceptable cost. Hiruzen's face hardened. That sounds like a threat. It is a condition. To whom? To everyone. The honesty was worse than cruelty. Saturn turned back to the crowd. There will be no war unless war is brought to me. If war is brought, the nation responsible will not survive the lesson. No one breathed. He said it with no anger, no performance, no raised voice. A geologist describing a fault line, a doctor describing terminal illness, a god describing weather. You may continue to call this the hidden leaf. You may continue to observe the will of fire. You may continue to love your symbols. These are human constructs. I will not disturb them unless they interfere with my work. His eyes lifted toward the Hokage monument, then returned to the people. But understand this, you are no longer the highest authority in your own story. The words passed through Konoha like winter. That adjustment will be uncomfortable. Begin immediately. Then he turned and walked away. The crowd parted, no one ordered it. No one needed to. Saturn crossed the square and disappeared down the road toward Naruto's apartment. Behind him, the village remained still, no applause, no shouting, no riot, just silence. The kind that came after history changed shape. That night, Konoha did not sleep. Some prayed, some argued in whispers, some packed bags, then unpacked them because where could they go? Some cursed Naruto, some cursed the Hokage, some cursed the Uchiha, the Nine Tails, the villages, the sage, the moon, anything large enough to hold blame. At Ikaraku Ramen, Chuchai stood behind the counter long after closing, staring at the empty stool where Naruto used to sit. Ayame wiped the same bowl 3 times. "Dad," she said quietly, "is he still Naruto?" Chuchai did not answer quickly, then he set the bowl down. "I don't know." Ayame's eyes lowered. Chuchai looked toward the street. "But if he comes here hungry, I'm feeding him." It was not a political statement. It was not a plan. It was one ordinary human decision. In the days to come, such decisions would matter more than anyone knew. Saturn returned to the apartment and did not turn on the light. Moonlight filled the room red. The notebook sat on the desk, open. He had not opened it. On the visible page was a drawing that had not been there before. A crowd, badly drawn, childish, circles for heads, lines for bodies. At the center stood a small orange figure. But the figure was crossed out. Above it, in messy letters, were 3 words. "I am here." Saturn stood motionless. Inside the mindscape, Kurama rose slowly. Shukaku's distant presence quieted in the outer network. For the first time, Saturn did not close the notebook. Instead, he entered the deep interior. Not the dark plane where Kurama's seal rested, deeper, past memory, past chakra, past the structures Saturn had claimed and organized. There, at the bottom of the vessel's soul, stood a small village. Not Konoha, not exactly. A child's version of it. The Hokage monument was too big. The ramen stand glowed too warmly. The streets were too clean. The sky was blue in a way reality rarely managed. Houses leaned at impossible angles because they had been built from memory, longing, and imagination. This was the place Naruto had made when the real village would not have him. A private Konoha. A kinder one. Saturn stood at its edge. He did not enter. In the middle of the street stood Naruto Uzumaki, small, 8 years old, orange jacket, blue eyes, not ocean dark, human blue. The boy stared at him for a long time, neither spoke. Outside, the red moon watched the real village. Inside, the buried child watched the god wearing his life. Saturn spoke first. "You altered the notebook." Naruto said nothing. "You are expending effort inefficiently." Still nothing. The child's hands were clenched at his sides, not strong, not threatening, but present. Saturn studied him. "You cannot reclaim control." Naruto's mouth trembled. He did not speak. Perhaps he could not. Perhaps words were still too far away, but his eyes did not lower. That mattered. Saturn looked past him, toward the imagined ramen stand, the imagined academy, the imagined Hokage faces. "You built this from insufficient material," he said. The boy's expression changed. Anger. Small, bright, wounded anger. Saturn observed it, then, after a pause, corrected himself. "You built this despite insufficient material." The anger flickered, not gone, but changed. Kurama, watching from far above in the mindscape, went very still. Saturn turned away from the border. "Subordinate," he said. The word echoed between them. Then he added, quieter, "not eliminated." Naruto remained in the street, watching. Saturn left the deep interior. He returned to the apartment, to the desk, to the open notebook beneath the red moon. For several minutes, he did nothing. Then he picked up a pencil. His hand moved slowly, not with childish messiness. With precise, controlled lines, below Naruto's words, he wrote one sentence. presence acknowledged, then he closed the notebook. Morning came gray over Konoha, the moon faded, but the memory of its red light remained in every window, every rooftop, every frightened conversation. The village had not fallen, that almost made things worse. Because destruction would have been easier to understand, instead, shops opened. Shinobi reported for duty. Children walked to the academy. The Hokage entered his office. Jiraiya took up residence in a spare room he complained about loudly. Sasuke trained until his hands shook. The Uchiha survivors continued rebuilding. Danzo began drafting new contingencies. Orochimaru received Saturn's reply and smiled like a man who had found a doorway into a forbidden room. Across the world, the remaining tailed beasts felt the circuit forming. And in a cold apartment under the fading shadow of a red moon, Naruto Saturn sat at the desk, one hand resting on a closed notebook that now contained two handwritings, one messy, one precise, one human, one ancient. The village outside was learning the shape of its new forever. But deep inside the vessel, a boy who was supposed to be silent had written 3 words, "I am here." And for the first time since the night of the massacre, the god had answered.